When a billionaire's signature threatens to erase an entire neighborhood, the woman cleaning his penthouse discovers she's not just fighting for her home, she's facing the one man who might understand her family better than she does. This is a story about power, secrets, and the invisible threads that connect two worlds that should never have met. A story where a single mother's quiet desperation collides with a billionaire's hidden past, where trust becomes the most dangerous currency of all. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happens next? Nobody saw it coming. The city never truly slept, but at 5:47 a.m., it came damn close. Ethan Hayes stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, 53 stories above the streets that were just beginning to stir. The glass was cold against his palm, the only thing in this temperature-controlled, perfectly calibrated space that ever was. Below, headlights traced arteries through the pre-dawn gray, tiny and distant, and utterly disconnected from him. He'd been awake for an hour already. Sleeping more than 4 hours felt like weakness, though he'd never admit that to anyone. Not to his business partners, not to his daughter's nanny, not even to himself in any meaningful way. He just didn't sleep. There was always another proposal to review, another acquisition to plan, another problem that required his particular brand of surgical decision-making. This morning, it was the Third Avenue development project. The files were spread across his dining table, a slab of reclaimed wood that cost more than most people's cars and that he'd eaten at maybe twice. Site surveys, demographic reports, financial projections, numbers that made sense, that followed logical patterns, that promised returns his investors would celebrate. The neighborhood in question was dying anyway. Everyone knew it. 6 blocks of aging buildings, failing businesses, residents who couldn't afford to maintain their properties. The smart move, the only move that made financial sense, was to buy it all, tear it down, rebuild it as something profitable. Mixed-use development, luxury condos, street-level retail for the right kind of tenant, clean, efficient, profitable. Ethan's phone buzzed against the table. A message from his daughter's nanny. "Mira's running a slight fever. Nothing serious, but wanted you to know." He stared at the message for 3 seconds, calculated the likelihood of it becoming serious, determined it didn't require his immediate attention, and set the phone down. He'd check on her before his 8 a.m. conference call. That was 2 hours away. Plenty of time. The fever would break or it wouldn't. The nanny was competent. He paid her enough to be. He returned to the windows, watching the city lighten by degrees. Somewhere down there, in one of those indistinguishable buildings, people were waking up to lives he'd left behind so long ago they felt like someone else's memories. People who worried about electric bills and grocery money and whether their cars would start. People who didn't understand that sentiment was expensive. That compassion was a luxury you couldn't afford if you wanted to survive. He'd learned that lesson early and learned it hard. The intercom crackled. "Mister? Hayes, your breakfast is ready." "Leave it," he said, not turning from the window. He didn't hear the housekeeper's response, if there was one. They knew better than to push. Everyone in his employ knew better than to push. Across the city, in a neighborhood that would have been invisible from Ethan's penthouse even in full daylight, Lena Alvarez was trying to convince her 8-month-old daughter that 5:30 a.m. was not, in fact, an appropriate time to be awake and screaming. "Please, baby, please, please, please." Lena bounced Maya against her shoulder, her voice raw from an hour of this. "Mama has to work. You have to sleep. Those are the rules." Maya disagreed, loudly. The apartment was small enough that Lena could pace its entire length in 8 steps, living room to kitchenette to bedroom and back again. The walls were thin enough that she could hear Mrs. Chen coughing next door, could hear the couple upstairs arguing in muffled bursts, could practically hear her own desperation echoing off the water-stained ceiling. "Okay," she whispered, switching tactics. "Okay, you win. You win, baby girl." She settled into the second-hand rocking chair that squeaked with every movement and started singing softly. Not anything in particular, just nonsense sounds that seemed to work when nothing else did. Maya's screams downgraded to whimpers, then to the hiccuping breaths that meant she was finally giving in. Lena's phone said 5:52 a.m. Her shift started at 7. The hotel was 45 minutes away by bus, assuming the bus was on time, which it usually wasn't. She needed to shower, get dressed, get Maya to Mrs. Rodriguez 2 floors down, and somehow choke down enough coffee to function. She could do this. She'd done this yesterday and the day before and the day before that. The formula situation, though, that was becoming a problem. She glanced at the kitchen counter where 3 cans sat in a row. 2 were empty. The third was maybe a third full. Maybe. She'd been stretching it, watering it down just slightly, telling herself it was fine, babies were resilient. People in other countries did this all the time. The rent was due in 4 days. The electric bill was already late. Her brother's medication cost $200 a month that their insurance didn't cover because of some paperwork issue nobody could seem to fix. Her mother's hours at the factory had been cut again. The formula was $70 a can. Lena felt Maya's weight go slack against her shoulder, that particular heaviness that meant sleep had finally won. She didn't move, didn't risk it, just sat there in the squeaking chair, holding her daughter, watching the window lighten from black to dark blue to something that might eventually become morning. "We're okay," she whispered into Maya's wispy hair. "We're going to be okay." It was the same lie she told every morning. Some days she almost believed it. The Imperial Grand Hotel occupied an entire city block in the financial district, all glass and steel and the kind of aggressive luxury that made people feel inadequate just walking past it. Lena had been working there for 6 months, ever since the diner where she'd waitressed closed down with 2 weeks' notice and 3 weeks' back pay they'd never seen. The housekeeping job wasn't better, exactly. The pay was roughly the same, the hours just as brutal, the work just as invisible. But it was steady, and in her world, steady meant everything. "Lena, you're late." Mariana, the head housekeeper, appeared from around the supply closet looking harried. She always looked harried. The hotel ran on a skeleton crew maintained by management's careful calculation of exactly how much work humans could do before they actually collapsed. "I'm sorry, the bus—" "I don't care about the bus." Mariana thrust a tablet into her hands. "You've got the West Tower today. Floors 40 through 53. Rodriguez called in sick, probably hungover, so you're covering her rooms too." Lena looked at the screen. 14 rooms. She usually did 9, maybe 10 on a bad day. "I don't think I can—" "You can, and you will. I've got 3 weddings this weekend and half my staff out with that flu that's going around. You want the hours or not?" Lena's mouth closed. Mariana knew she wanted the hours. Mariana knew she needed the hours. They both knew Lena would never actually say no. "Good. Start with 5301, VIP suite. Guy specifically requested someone discreet." Mariana's expression suggested what she thought of that. "So don't try to make conversation, don't touch anything that doesn't need cleaning, and for the love of everything, don't break anything. Those light fixtures cost more than your car." "I don't have a car." "Exactly." Mariana was already walking away. "And Lena, do a good job. This one could turn into a regular assignment if you don't screw it up." The elevator to the 53rd floor required a key card that Lena didn't have. She had to call down to the front desk, wait 7 minutes while they verified her credentials, then wait another 4 for security to bring up the override. By the time she finally stepped out into the private hallway, carpeted in something so soft her footsteps disappeared completely, she was already behind schedule. Suite 5301 had its own entrance, its own doorbell, its own small foyer before you even got to the actual door. Lena knocked once, twice, then used her master key when nobody answered. "Housekeeping?" she called out, her voice sounding small in the massive space. Nothing. The suite was bigger than her entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated one wall, offering a view of the city that made her dizzy just looking at it. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive materials, the kind of stuff you saw in magazines and never imagined actually sitting on. Everything was aggressively modern, aggressively minimal, aggressively expensive, and surprisingly messy. Not dirty. Nothing was ever actually dirty in a place like this, but lived in. A laptop open on the dining table surrounded by papers, coffee cups on the counter, the coffee long gone cold, a small pair of sneakers by the door, tiny and pink, and somehow heartbreaking. A kid lived here, or visited. Lena started with the kitchen, working methodically, trying not to think about what these appliances cost or what it would be like to have counter space that didn't require Tetris-level organization to use. The dishwasher was full of clean dishes that nobody had bothered to put away. She unloaded it, careful with each plate and glass, hyper-aware that breaking anything here would probably cost her a month's salary. She was wiping down the marble counters when she heard footsteps. "You're early." Lena spun around, nearly dropping the cloth. A man stood in the hallway leading to what she assumed were the bedrooms. Tall, maybe mid-30s, wearing dress pants and an undone button-up shirt like he'd been interrupted mid-dressing. Dark hair still damp from a shower. Eyes that assessed her in a single sweep and then dismissed her just as quickly. Ethan Hayes. She recognized him from the photos that occasionally showed up in the business section of newspapers she didn't usually read. Billionaire developer. Venture capitalist. One of those people who seem to exist in a different reality than normal humans. "I'm sorry," Lena stammered. "The front desk said I can come back." "No." He walked past her to the coffee maker, started it with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "I'll be out of your way in 10 minutes. Just pretend I'm not here." Like that was possible. He poured coffee into one of the cups she'd just washed, drank it black while scrolling through his phone, radiating the kind of focused intensity that made the air feel heavier. Lena turned back to the counter, trying to work quietly, trying to be invisible. That was the skill, really. The thing they never told you about jobs like this. It wasn't about cleaning. Any idiot could clean. It was about learning to exist in someone's space without actually existing. About being useful without being noticed. "You're new." Lena looked up. He was watching her now, really watching her in a way that made her intensely uncomfortable. "I've been here 6 months," she said carefully. "New to this floor, then?" He took another sip of coffee. "What's your name?" Nobody ever asked her name. In 6 months, maybe 3 guests had bothered. Most people looked right through her, and she preferred it that way. "Lena. Lena." He repeated it like he was filing it away. "You live in the city?" "Yes." "Where?" The question felt invasive, though she couldn't articulate why. 3rd Avenue area? Something flickered across his face, too fast to read. "That's a long commute." "The bus runs early." "The bus?" He said it the way someone might say horse and buggy, like he couldn't quite believe such things still existed. "You have kids?" Lena's hand tightened on the cleaning cloth. "A daughter." "How old?" 8 months. She didn't add the rest, that Maya was probably crying right now in Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, that Mrs. Rodriguez was 72 and doing Lena a favor she could never repay, that Lena spent every minute of every shift worried about whether she was failing as a mother. Ethan set down his coffee cup. "There's cash in the bedroom, top drawer of the nightstand. Take what you need for formula." Lena's brain short-circuited. "What?" "You're watering it down." He was putting on his jacket now, checking his watch. "I can tell. You've got that look. Take 200. That should cover a few cans." Heat rushed to her face. I'm not offering charity. Consider it a tip." He was heading for the door now, grabbing a briefcase that probably cost more than her rent. "Do a good job and you'll be assigned here regularly. The regular staff can't seem to understand that I don't want them moving my papers around." He was gone before she could respond, the door clicking shut with the kind of finality that suggested the conversation was over. Lena stood frozen in the kitchen, her heart hammering. $200. She thought about Maya's diminishing formula supply, about the bills stacked on her counter, about pride versus survival, dignity versus desperation. She thought about it for maybe 30 seconds. Then she walked into the bedroom, opened the nightstand drawer, and found a stack of bills that made her slightly nauseous. She took exactly $200, counted it twice, and put it in her pocket where it felt like it was burning through the fabric. She cleaned the suite with a thoroughness that bordered on obsessive, touching every surface, checking every corner, making sure everything was exactly right. Not because she was grateful, she wasn't sure what she felt, actually, but because if this was going to be a regular thing, she needed it to be. The formula situation wasn't solved, but it was handled. For now. And in Lena's life, for now was sometimes the best you could hope for. 3 days later, Mariana found her restocking her cart on the 42nd floor. 5301 requested you specifically for tomorrow. Lena's hands stilled on the stack of towels. "He did? Don't sound so surprised. Apparently you didn't rearrange his entire life like Patterson did last week." Mariana checked her tablet. He wants you there at 6 a.m. sharp, before his morning calls. 6 a.m. meant leaving the apartment at 5:15, meant waking Maya even earlier, meant less sleep, more caffeine, more of the constant exhaustion that had become her baseline state. Okay, Lena said. There's more. Mariana's expression was unreadable. He's requested you exclusively, 4 times a week, same suite. It's good money. They're adding a premium for the regular assignment. But Lena, you need to be careful. Careful how? Men like that, Mariana chose her words precisely. They live in a different world. They're used to getting what they want. You understand what I'm saying? Lena understood perfectly. She'd been understanding that particular warning since she was old enough to notice the way some men looked at women they considered beneath them. I'll be careful. Good. Because jobs like this don't come around often, and I don't want to see you screw it up by misreading the situation. The pattern established itself quickly. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, 6 a.m. sharp at Suite 5301. Ethan was always there, always in the middle of something, always radiating that same controlled intensity. Sometimes he acknowledged her with a nod. Sometimes he didn't acknowledge her at all. She learned his routines. Coffee first, always black, made while checking his phone. Then to the dining table where he spread out papers and worked until exactly 7:30. Sometimes there was breakfast delivered. Always the same thing. Always barely touched. The small pink sneakers appeared some mornings and disappeared others, following a pattern she couldn't quite track. He never mentioned the money again. Neither did she. But after the second week, she found $300 in the nightstand drawer. After the third week, $400. She never took more than she needed for formula and diapers. It felt like a line she couldn't cross, taking anything beyond immediate necessity. Pride, maybe, or some kind of moral accounting she couldn't quite explain. But she took it. Of course she took it. Her mother asked where the extra money was coming from. Lena said she'd picked up overtime. It wasn't technically a lie. Her brother said she looked tired. She told him she was fine. That was definitely a lie. One morning in the fourth week, she arrived to find Ethan on the phone, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. I don't care what the preliminary report says. Get me the updated numbers by noon or find someone who can. He hung up without saying goodbye, stood at the window for 30 seconds, then seemed to notice Lena for the first time. How old is your daughter now? The question caught her off guard. 9 months, almost 10. That's a good age. Something in his voice softened marginally. Mine's 3. He paused, seeming to reconsider whatever he'd been about to say. She's with her nanny this week. Lena didn't know how to respond. The personal information felt like a door opening slightly, and she wasn't sure if she was supposed to walk through it or pretend she hadn't noticed. What's her name? She asked carefully. Mira. The softness was more pronounced now. She likes butterflies and dinosaurs. Mostly dinosaurs lately. Maya likes lights. Anything bright that she can stare at. Smart kid. I don't know about smart. Stubborn, definitely. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. That's the same thing. The moment stretched between them, strange and fragile. Then his phone rang, the spell broke, and he was back to being the billionaire developer barking instructions into his phone. Lena returned to cleaning, but something had shifted. Some invisible barrier had thinned just slightly. It was 6 weeks into the arrangement when Lena found the documents. She wasn't snooping. That was important. She wasn't snooping. The papers were on the dining table where they always were, and she was just moving them slightly to wipe down the surface like she did every morning. But the header caught her eye. 3rd Avenue Redevelopment Initiative, Phase 1 Acquisition. Her street address was in the 3rd paragraph. Lena's hands went numb. She shouldn't read it. She knew she shouldn't read it, but her eyes were already scanning the page, catching phrases that didn't make sense and then suddenly made horrible sense. Targeted acquisition of properties between 3rd and 5th Streets, projected displacement of current residents, demolition timeline Q2 2024. Her building was listed by address, her neighbor's buildings, Mrs. Rodriguez's building, the corner store where her mother bought groceries, the church, well, not the church exactly, but the community center next to it where her brother went for physical therapy. All of it, slated for demolition, and Ethan Hayes' signature was at the bottom of every page. Find something interesting? Lena spun around so fast she knocked over the stack of papers. Ethan stood in the hallway, dressed but barefoot, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. I was just cleaning. You were reading. He walked over, started gathering the papers with calm efficiency. It's fine. You would have found out eventually anyway. You're going to destroy my neighborhood. It came out as an accusation because that's exactly what it was. I'm going to redevelop it. That's the same thing. No. He set the papers down, met her eyes directly. It's not. Those buildings are falling apart, Lena. Half of them aren't up to code. The infrastructure is failing. The businesses can barely stay open. I'm offering people a way out of their homes, a way out of poverty. His voice was level, maddeningly rational. Fair market value for properties that aren't worth what I'm offering. Relocation assistance, first right of refusal on new units when what? When you've bulldozed everything and built condos nobody from there can afford? Lena was shaking now, from anger or fear or both. You think you're helping? You think you're doing us a favor? I think I'm doing what needs to be done. That neighborhood is dying whether I buy it or not. At least this way, people get compensated. People get displaced. People get options they didn't have before. Lena wanted to throw something, wanted to scream, wanted to tell him that options were useless when all of them required leaving behind everything you knew, everyone you loved, the entire geography of your life. But he was her employer. Sort of. And she needed this job. Desperately. I need to finish cleaning, she said instead, her voice carefully flat. Ethan watched her for a long moment. Lena, I need to finish cleaning. He let her walk away. She felt his eyes on her back as she gathered her supplies with shaking hands, as she moved into the bedroom to strip the sheets she'd just changed 2 days ago because she needed something to do with her hands. The money was still in the nightstand drawer. $400. She looked at it for a long time, thought about pride, thought about principles, thought about Maya's formula and her mother's medication and the rent that was due in 2 days. She took the money, hated herself for it, but she took it. She almost quit. Spent the entire bus ride home composing the resignation in her head. Spent that night staring at the water-stained ceiling while Maya slept beside her, running through all the ways this could play out. She could quit, find another job. Except jobs like this didn't grow on trees, and she'd already burned through 3 since Maya was born because childcare was impossible, and emergencies were constant, and employers wanted reliability she couldn't always provide. She could keep working there and just avoid him. Except he'd specifically requested her, and refusing that assignment meant losing the premium pay, and she needed that premium pay like she needed oxygen. She could confront him, demand he cancel the development, except she already knew how that would go, with her unemployed and him proceeding exactly as planned because what was one pissed-off housekeeper to a billionaire developer? There were no good options, just variations of bad ones. What am I supposed to do? She whispered to the ceiling. The ceiling, unsurprisingly, didn't answer. She showed up Monday morning at 6 a.m. because what else was she going to do? Ethan was at the dining table, laptop open, coffee untouched beside him. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression suggested he hadn't been sure she'd come. Lena. Mr. Hayes. They hadn't been using his last name before. The formality created distance, built walls that needed building. I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything. I'm just here to clean. Nevertheless. He closed the laptop, gave her his full attention in a way that felt simultaneously respectful and unnerving. Sit. I'd rather not. Then stand, but listen. He paused, seeming to organize his thoughts. That neighborhood, your neighborhood, it's personal to me. It doesn't seem personal, seems like business. It's both. He stood, walked to the window. I grew up there. Lena's brain stuttered. What? Different name back then, different life, but same 6 blocks you're trying to protect. He kept his gaze on the city, not looking at her. My father worked at the factory on 5th Street until it closed. We lived in a 2-bedroom walk-up that we couldn't afford even before he lost his job. When the landlord kicked us out, your father-in-law gave us a place to stay. Lena felt like the floor had tilted. My father-in-law? Antonio Alvarez. He ran that community center you're worried about. Except back then, it was barely more than a room with some folding chairs and a coffee pot that only worked half the time. Ethan finally turned to face her. I was 16, angry, convinced the world had screwed me over and I was going to screw it back. Antonio saw that, and instead of writing me off, he gave me work, paid me to fix things around the center, to help with the food drives, to tutor younger kids. I don't understand. If you knew Antonio, if you lived there, that's exactly why I'm doing this. His intensity was focused on her now, laser sharp. I watched that neighborhood decline for years before we left. Watched businesses close, watched people leave, watched the infrastructure crumble. It's been 30 years, Lena, and it's only gotten worse. The buildings are literally falling apart. The city's not going to fix it. The landlords aren't going to fix it. Someone has to. So you're going to destroy it to save it? I'm going to rebuild it before it collapses on its own. He pulled up something on his laptop, turned it to show her. This is the plan. Not just luxury condos, though, yes, there will be some because that's what funds the rest, but also affordable housing, below market rate, subsidized, actual affordable. The community center gets rebuilt, expanded, properly funded. The small businesses get first right of refusal on new commercial space at reduced rates. Lena stared at the renderings. They looked too good to be true, which usually meant they were. People don't believe promises from developers. Smart people don't. That's why I need you. What? You know that community. You understand it in ways I don't anymore. The demographics have changed. The needs have evolved. I need someone who can tell me what people actually need versus what I think they need. He paused. I need someone who'll call me out when I'm wrong. You want to hire me? Lena's voice came out strangled. As a consultant, community liaison, whatever title works, paid obviously, well paid. I clean hotel rooms. You understand people. You notice things. You care about that neighborhood in ways that matter. He closed the laptop. I'm going to do this project either way, Lena, with or without your input. But it'll be better, actually better, not just theoretically better, if you're involved. It was a trap, had to be. Some kind of manipulation to get her on board, to neutralize opposition, to make the whole thing seem more palatable. Except Antonio had trusted people, had seen potential in angry teenagers and struggling families and anyone who walked through his door, had believed that people were worth investing in even when the investment didn't make logical sense. And if Ethan was telling the truth, if he'd been one of those people Antonio had seen something in, then maybe... I need to think about it, Lena said. Fair enough, take your time. But I'm not quitting the cleaning job. Not yet. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. Also fair. She talked to her mother that night, then her brother, then Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd known Antonio better than almost anyone. He never mentioned someone named Ethan Hayes, Mrs. Rodriguez said, frowning. He said he used a different name back then. There were always kids at that center. Antonio helped everyone. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. There was one boy, brilliant but troubled, always reading these business books from the library. Antonio used to say that kid was either going to change the world or burn it down, and he couldn't tell which. She looked at Lena sharply. You think that's your Mr. Hayes? I don't know. Maybe. Well, Mrs. Rodriguez started clearing dishes. Antonio would tell you to trust your gut and to make sure whatever you decide helps people, not just yourself. Lena showed up for her next shift with a list of questions written on the back of an envelope. Demands, really, not asks. Ethan read through them while she pretended to clean counters that were already clean. You want guaranteed affordable housing units, not just some units, a specific percentage. 40%. That's not financially viable. Then make it viable. You're a genius businessman, right? Figure it out. His mouth twitched. What else? Current residents get first right of refusal. Real first right, not just a PR thing where you offer them units they can't afford. Agreed. Small businesses get actual support, not just space, actual financial support to relocate, rebuild, survive the transition. Reasonable. And I want it in writing, all of it. Legal contracts, not promises. Of course. He set down the envelope. Anything else? I want regular community meetings. Real ones, where people can ask questions and you have to answer them, publicly. That could get messy. That's democracy. Fair point. He was watching her with something that might have been amusement. You're good at this. I'm protective of my family. Same thing. The moment stretched between them again, that same strange understanding from before. There's something else you should know, Ethan said finally. I knew who you were before you started working here. Lena went very still. What? Your connection to Antonio. I've been tracking his family for years, making sure they were okay. When I saw your name on the housekeeping roster, he shrugged. I requested you specifically. You've been stalking my family? I've been making sure Antonio's legacy wasn't forgotten. There's a difference. That's creepy. Probably, but true. He met her eyes directly. I owed him. I still do. This project, part of it is about fixing the neighborhood, but part of it is about honoring what he built, making sure it survives in some form. Lena didn't know what to do with that information. Didn't know if it made things better or worse or just more complicated. I'll do it, she said finally. The consultant thing. But I'm still keeping the cleaning job until I see how this plays out. You don't trust me. I don't trust anyone who has the power to destroy my life with a signature. Smart. He offered his hand. We'll start next week. I'll have my lawyers draw up a contract. Lena looked at his hand for a long moment, thought about all the ways this could go wrong, all the ways she could be making a massive mistake. Then she shook it. His grip was firm, professional, exactly what she'd expected. But there was something else there too, a connection maybe, or just the weight of history they hadn't asked for but couldn't escape. One more thing, she said, not letting go yet. If you screw this up, if you screw over my family, my neighbors, anyone, I will make your life hell. I don't care if you're a billionaire. I will find a way. Instead of being offended, he smiled. Actually smiled. Antonio would have said exactly the same thing. Good. She released his hand. Then we understand each other. But shush. The next morning, Lena showed up at the community center with Ethan Hayes in tow. A billionaire developer in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, standing in a room with water-damaged walls and ancient linoleum and people who looked at him like he'd personally shot their dog. Her mother was there. Her brother, Mrs. Rodriguez. Half the block, actually, because news traveled fast in neighborhoods like this. You brought him here? Her mother hissed in Spanish. Are you insane? Possibly, Lena answered in English, making sure Ethan heard. But we're going to hear what he has to say. What followed was 2 hours of the most intense questioning Lena had ever witnessed. People who'd been dismissed and ignored and talked over their entire lives, suddenly given permission to demand answers from someone who actually had the power to affect their futures. Ethan answered every question, didn't dodge, didn't deflect, didn't hide behind corporate speak. When he didn't know something, he said so. When someone challenged him, he engaged rather than condescended. It didn't win everyone over. Several people walked out. Others stayed, but made it clear they weren't buying what he was selling. But some listened, started asking different questions, started trying to find the trap, while also trying to imagine that maybe, possibly, there wasn't one. This is going to be a disaster, her brother muttered to Lena. You know that, right? Probably. So why are you doing it? Lena watched Ethan explain his proposal to Mrs. Chen, who barely spoke English but was trying to understand anyway. Watched him take the time to make sure she actually got it, not just nod and move on. Because Antonio would have given him a chance, she said finally, and because doing nothing definitely doesn't work. Her brother shook his head. You're either brave or stupid, also probably both. As the meeting wound down, people started filtering out. Some shook Ethan's hand. Others left without acknowledgement. Lena's mother approached last, studied him with the kind of assessment that only mothers could manage. You knew Antonio, she said. Not a question. Yes, ma'am? He was a good man. The best I ever knew. Then don't dishonor his memory by lying to these people. She held his gaze, unflinching. They've been lied to before, by people who promised to help, by people who said they cared. Don't be another one. I won't. We'll see. She turned to Lena. You're sure about this? Lena wasn't sure about anything, but she said, yes. After everyone had left, Lena and Ethan stood in the empty community center. The afternoon light slanted through the dusty windows, illuminating cracks in the walls that needed fixing, floors that needed replacing, potential that needed nurturing. Thank you, Ethan said quietly, for setting that up. Don't thank me yet. Half of them think you're the devil, and the other half are just waiting for you to prove them right. What do you think? Lena considered the question seriously. I think you believe what you're saying. I think you genuinely want to help. But I also think you have no idea how easy it is for people like you to hurt people like us without meaning to. How your good intentions can still destroy lives. So teach me. I'm trying. But you have to actually listen. Not just hear, listen. There's a difference. I know. He looked around the room, and something in his expression was unguarded for the first time since she'd met him. I used to sit right there. He pointed to a corner, doing homework while Antonio tutored other kids. He had this way of making you feel like you mattered, like your potential was worth investing in, even when you were pretty sure you didn't have any. He was like that with everyone. I know, that's what made it special. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned. I have to go. Meeting in 20 minutes. Back to your real life. This is my real life too now, whether you believe that or not. After he left, Lena sat in Antonio's chair, the old office chair that squeaked and tilted slightly left, but that nobody had ever replaced because it was his. She pulled out her phone, found the photo of Maya she'd taken that morning, studied her daughter's face like it held answers. What am I doing, baby girl? She whispered to the image. Maya, frozen in mid-laugh, didn't answer, but somehow Lena felt like maybe she was on the right track anyway, or maybe she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Time would tell. The contract arrived 3 days later via courier, a thick envelope with Ethan's law firm's return address that made Lena's hands shake just holding it. She spread the pages across her kitchen table while Maya gnawed on a teething ring in her bouncer, drool cascading down her chin. 47 pages of legal language that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. Lena called the one lawyer she knew, her cousin's ex-husband who practiced family law in the suburbs and owed her a favor from when she'd testified in his custody hearing. Jesus Christ, Lena. Derek's voice crackled through her phone speaker. This is a corporate contract. I do divorces and child support. Can you just tell me if I'm getting screwed? She heard papers rustling. Hold on. Okay, compensation structure looks solid. Hourly rate plus project bonuses. Wow, that's actually generous. Health insurance after 90 days. What kind of consulting is this? Community development. For who? Hayes Development Corporation. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that Lena thought the call had dropped. Derek? Ethan Hayes, the Ethan Hayes. You know him? Everyone knows him. Guy's worth like $3 billion. Lena, what the hell are you consulting on? He's redeveloping my neighborhood. I'm supposed to make sure he doesn't destroy it in the process. Derek laughed, sharp and disbelieving. That's either brilliant or insane, possibly both. Look, from what I can see, the contract's legit. Standard non-disclosure agreement, which makes sense. Termination clause is reasonable. Either party can walk with 30 days' notice. The compensation is way above market rate for community liaison work, which is either him being generous or him really wanting you locked in. Which do you think it is? Does it matter? The money's real either way. After they hung up, Lena stared at the signature line. Her name was already typed there. Lena Marie Alvarez, just waiting for her to make it official. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. They've been lied to before. But Antonio's voice was there too, quieter but persistent. Trust has to start somewhere. She signed it, then immediately wanted to vomit. The first official meeting happened in a conference room so aggressively expensive it made Lena feel like she was contaminating it just by breathing. Glass walls, ergonomic chairs that probably cost more than her couch, a view of the city that reminded her exactly how far she was from home. Ethan sat at the head of the table, flanked by 3 people in suits who looked like they'd been genetically engineered to intimidate. His lead architect, his project manager, and someone whose title Lena didn't catch but whose expression suggested she found this entire exercise pointless. Lena, thank you for coming. Ethan gestured to the chair beside him. Not across from him, she noticed. Beside. Everyone, this is Lena Alvarez. She'll be our community liaison for the Third Avenue project. The architect, a woman named Patricia with severe glasses and severely perfect hair, looked Lena up and down in a way that made it clear she'd been found wanting. What's your background in urban development? I don't have one. Real estate? No. City planning? Architecture? Any relevant education? I have a GED and 6 months of community college before I had to drop out. Lena met Patricia's gaze steadily. But I've lived in that neighborhood my entire life. I know every family on those 6 blocks, every business, every problem the city's been ignoring for 30 years. So maybe I don't have your degrees, but I have something you don't. I actually give a damn about the people you're planning to displace. The silence that followed could have cut glass. Then Ethan laughed. Actually laughed. That's why she's here, Patricia. To make sure we don't repeat every mistake developers have made in the past decade. Patricia's expression suggested she had thoughts about that, none of them positive. The project manager, a nervous man named Tom who kept adjusting his tie, pulled up architectural renderings on the screen. We're looking at a phased approach. Phase 1 focuses on the northern 2 blocks. Acquisition, demolition, and rebuild over 18 months. Then Phase 2, wait, Lena held up a hand. Demolition? Well, yes. The structures are too deteriorated to renovate. It's more cost-effective to... Mrs. Chen's building has been there since 1952. She raised 4 kids in that apartment. Tom blinked. I'm sorry, who's Mrs. Chen? Exactly. Lena pulled out her phone, scrolled to the photos she'd taken that morning. This is what you're actually tearing down, not just structures. People's homes, businesses that have survived recessions and riots and decades of the city not giving a damn. You want to demolish that? Patricia leaned forward. Miss Alvarez, I understand you're emotionally invested, but structural integrity isn't negotiable. Those buildings are dangerous. So fix them. The cost of renovation would exceed... I didn't ask about cost. I asked if they could be fixed. Theoretically, but then we start there. Lena looked at Ethan. You promised to preserve what matters. Buildings matter. History matters. You can't just erase that and call it progress. Ethan was watching her with that same intense focus from the penthouse. What are you suggesting? A mix. Some buildings get renovated and preserved, the ones with historical value or structural soundness. Others get rebuilt, but in a way that respects the neighborhood's character. Not everything has to be glass and steel. She turned to the architect. Can you work with that? Patricia's jaw tightened. It would significantly complicate the timeline and budget. That's not what I asked. Yes, it can be done. But, Mr. Hayes, I need to stress that this approach will make it work, Ethan said quietly. Lena's right. We preserve what we can, rebuild what we must, but we do it with respect for what was there before. The third suit, the woman whose title Lena still didn't know, finally spoke. This is going to cost a fortune. Then it costs a fortune. Ethan's tone left no room for argument. Next item. The meeting lasted 3 more hours. They discussed everything from parking structures to green space to the percentage of affordable units. Every time someone tried to slide past a detail with corporate speak, Lena pushed back. Every time they assumed she wouldn't understand the technical aspects, she asked questions until she did. By the end, Patricia looked like she wanted to strangle her. Tom looked exhausted. The third suit had stopped participating entirely, but Ethan looked satisfied. Good first session. Same time next week? After everyone else filed out, Lena stayed behind, suddenly aware of how drained she was. Confrontation exhausted her in ways physical labor never did. You did well, Ethan said, gathering his papers. Your architect hates me. Patricia hates everyone. It's her baseline state. He paused. But she's also the best at what she does. She'll come around once she realizes you're not going anywhere. What if I'm going anywhere? Are you? Lena thought about Maya, about the formula she could now afford without counting pennies, about her mother's medication that didn't require choosing between pills and groceries, about the health insurance that would kick in after 90 days. No, she admitted. Not yet, anyway. Then we're good. He checked his watch. I have to pick up Mira from her ballet class. Do you need a ride somewhere? The offer caught her off guard. I take the bus. I know. I'm offering an alternative. Why? Because it's rush hour and the bus takes 90 minutes and you have a daughter waiting for you. When she hesitated, he added, It's not a trick, Lena. It's just a ride. The car was exactly what she'd expected. Sleek, black interior that smelled like leather and money. The driver didn't acknowledge her beyond a nod, probably used to Ethan picking up random employees. They rode in silence for the first 10 minutes, Lena hyper-aware of the space between them, the careful distance she was maintaining. You're good at this, Ethan said finally. At what? Seeing through bullshit, asking the questions that matter. That's a rare skill. It's not a skill, it's survival. You learn to spot lies when your life depends on it. Fair point. He was watching the city slide past. Antonio used to do the same thing. He'd sit in on city council meetings and ask questions nobody else thought to ask. Drove them crazy. He told me about those meetings. Said the council ignored him for years. Until they couldn't anymore. He organized the neighborhood, got people to show up, made noise they couldn't dismiss. Ethan's expression shifted, something almost vulnerable crossing his face. I went with him once. I was maybe 17, thought I was too cool for community activism, but watching him hold those politicians accountable, it was the first time I understood that power wasn't just about money. It was about persistence, about refusing to be invisible. What happened? Why'd you leave? My father got a job 3 states away. We moved. I stayed in touch with Antonio for a while, but life happened. College, then business school, then building my first company. He shrugged. By the time I had enough success to come back, he'd passed. Heart attack, sudden. I was at a conference in Singapore when I got the news. He was proud of you, Lena said quietly. He used to talk about this kid he'd mentored who'd made something of himself. Never mentioned your name, but he said you'd changed your life around, that you'd proven everyone wrong. Ethan's hands tightened slightly on his knees. I didn't make it to the funeral. He wouldn't have held that against you. Maybe not, but I hold it against myself. They pulled up to Lena's building, the contrast between Ethan's car and the neighborhood jarring enough that curtains twitched in windows. Mrs. Rodriguez would have questions. Everyone would have questions. Thank you for the ride, Lena said, reaching for the door handle. Lena, she paused. What you're doing, calling me out in meetings, pushing back on the plans, don't stop. That's what I need, what the project needs. Even when it makes things harder, especially then. She nodded and climbed out, feeling eyes on her from every direction. By tomorrow, the entire block would know she'd arrived in Ethan Hayes' car. The speculation would be merciless. But when she walked into Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment and Maya's face lit up with recognition, when her daughter reached for her with that pure, uncomplicated joy, the rest of it seemed smaller somehow. Tough day? Mrs. Rodriguez asked, settling Maya into Lena's arms. Long day. That car outside, that's him? Your billionaire? He's not my billionaire, he's my employer, temporarily. Mrs. Rodriguez made a noise that suggested she had opinions about that distinction. People are talking, mija. People always talk. They're saying you sold out, that you're helping him destroy the neighborhood. Lena had known this was coming, had prepared for it, but hearing it still stung. What do you think? I think you're trying to do something impossible, trying to save people who don't necessarily want to be saved the way you're offering. Mrs. Rodriguez touched Lena's shoulder gently. But I also think Antonio would be doing the same thing if he were here, so maybe impossible is worth trying. That night, after Maya was finally asleep, Lena pulled out the project files Ethan had given her, dozens of documents outlining every aspect of the development, financial projections, architectural plans, demographic studies. She read until her eyes burned, trying to understand the gap between what was promised and what would actually happen. The numbers were staggering. The project would cost hundreds of millions. Even with the affordable housing component, the math suggested displacement was inevitable. Not immediately, maybe. But over time, as property values rose, as the neighborhood transformed, as people who'd lived there for generations found themselves priced out by the success they'd helped create. Gentrification with a conscience was still gentrification. Lena's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Patricia Chen, the architect. We need to talk. Lena stared at the message, debating whether to respond. Another text came through. Not about the project, about my grandmother. Mrs. Chen on 3rd Avenue. I believe you mentioned her. Lena's chest tightened. She typed back. Your grandmother? Tomorrow. Coffee shop on Lexington and 47th, 7 a.m. Before work. The coffee shop was one of those places that charged $8 for coffee that tasted like it came from a gas station but had Wi-Fi and outlets, so people tolerated it. Patricia was already there when Lena arrived, dressed in what was probably her casual wear but still looked like it cost more than Lena's monthly rent. Thank you for coming. Patricia's voice was different without the corporate polish, rougher, more real. I wasn't sure you would. You said this was about Mrs. Chen. My grandmother, though I haven't seen her in probably 5 years. Patricia wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. We had a falling out. Family drama, stupid stuff that seemed important at the time. But when you mentioned her yesterday, mentioned her building, you didn't know it was on the demolition list. I knew the general area, but I don't know the neighborhood anymore. Haven't been back since I left for college 15 years ago. She looked up, and there was genuine distress in her eyes. Is she really still in that same apartment? The one on the 3rd floor with the fire escape? Yes, she's lived there since before I was born. Christ. Patricia set down her cup. I was 5 when we moved out. My parents wanted better schools, safer streets. My grandmother refused to leave. Said she'd raised 4 kids in that apartment, buried 2 husbands from that apartment, and she'd die in that apartment. We thought she was being stubborn. She was. She is. But she's also right. It's her home, which I'm helping to demolish. The words came out bitter. Do you know what that makes me? Lena thought about her own compromises, her own moral calculations. It makes you human. We all do what we think we have to do. That's not good enough. No, it's not. But it's where we start. Lena leaned forward. Help me then. You're the architect. You have actual power to change things. Those buildings we talked about preserving, make sure your grandmother's is one of them. Ethan already agreed to that approach. Agreeing in a meeting and actually implementing it are different things. You know how these projects work. Things get cut when budgets get tight, promises get forgotten when timelines slip. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. You don't trust him. I don't trust anyone with the power to destroy my life. That's just common sense. Fair enough. Patricia pulled out her tablet, started scrolling through files. Okay, here's what I can do. I'll personally audit every building on those 6 blocks. Real structural analysis, not just whatever shortcuts Tom's team was planning. The ones that can be saved, I'll create renovation plans that are actually feasible. The ones that can't, I'll design replacements that respect the original architecture. Why would you do that? Because my grandmother's right, about the home thing, about refusing to be erased just because someone with money decided your neighborhood isn't profitable enough. She met Lena's eyes. And because I've been doing this job for 12 years, and I can't remember the last time I actually cared about whether people would live in what I designed. Not just could afford to live in it, actually wanted to. They worked through 2 more cups of terrible coffee, Patricia showing Lena the architectural plans in detail, Lena pointing out which buildings mattered and why. Mrs. Chen's building could be saved. The structure was solid, just needed significant updates. The corner store where Lena's mother shopped could be preserved if they reinforced the foundation. The community center needed more than renovation, needed a complete rebuild. But Patricia thought they could incorporate elements of the original design. This is going to be a fight, Patricia warned. Tom's going to hate it because it complicates his timeline. Finance is going to hate it because it costs more. Every contractor is going to complain. Can you win? If Ethan backs me? Yes. He has final say on everything. Patricia's expression turned calculating. But he'll back me more easily if you're the one pushing for it. He listens to you. We've known each other 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, he's changed more about this project than he has in the 6 months of planning before you showed up. Patricia started packing up her tablet. I've worked with Ethan on 4 projects. He's brilliant, ruthless when he needs to be, and generally treats community input as a box to check rather than actual guidance. But with you, he actually listens. I don't know if it's because of Antonio or because he respects you or because of something else entirely, but whatever it is, use it. After Patricia left, Lena sat alone in the coffee shop, trying to process everything. She'd gone from enemy to reluctant ally in the span of an hour. Or maybe they'd both been reluctant allies all along, just on opposite sides of the same problem. Her phone rang. Ethan, I need you at the office this afternoon. City Planning Commission is reviewing our proposal, and they have questions about community impact. What kind of questions? The kind that need someone who actually knows the community to answer them. Can you be here by 2? Lena thought about her shift at the hotel, about the rooms she was supposed to clean. I'm still working housekeeping. I can't just... I'll call Mariana. Tell her you're needed for consultant work. She's going to think something's going on. Something is going on. You're consulting on a major development project. His voice softened slightly. Unless you're not ready for this to be your primary job? The contract says I have 90 days before benefits kick in. So, I can move that up. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. The contract is the contract. I'm not asking for special treatment. It's not special treatment. It is. And I don't want it. She took a breath. I'll be there at 2. But I'm not quitting housekeeping until the 90 days are up. That's non-negotiable. Silence. Then, okay. Understood. See you at 2. The Planning Commission meeting was worse than Lena had imagined. 12 people sitting around a table asking questions designed to trap rather than inform. They didn't care about the neighborhood. That much was obvious within the first 5 minutes. They cared about tax revenue and political optics and making sure nobody could accuse them of not doing their due diligence. Ms. Alvarez, a woman with perfect silver hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, focused on Lena. You're the community liaison for this project? Yes. And you've lived in the 3rd Avenue area how long? My entire life. 30 years. So you're quite invested in the outcome. It wasn't a question, but Lena answered anyway. Yes. Which makes one wonder about your objectivity. Mr. Hayes is paying you, correct? Paying you quite well, from what I understand. The room went very quiet. Ethan started to say something, but Lena cut him off. You're right. He's paying me. Which means I'm not doing this out of charity or idealism or any other bullshit people use to avoid compensating labor. She leaned forward. I'm being paid because my knowledge has value, because I understand things about that neighborhood that no amount of demographic research can tell you. And yes, I'm invested in the outcome, because unlike everyone else in this room, I actually have to live with the consequences of whatever you decide. The silver-haired woman's smile disappeared. Ms. Alvarez, I don't particularly care what you appreciate. You asked me to come here and answer questions about community impact. The impact is this. 600 families currently living in a neighborhood the city has ignored for 3 decades might finally get infrastructure improvements, might get safe buildings, might get opportunities they've never had, or they might get displaced and scattered and destroyed. Which one happens depends on whether you actually care about implementation or just want to rubber stamp another development project. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Then one of the commissioners, an older black man who'd been quiet until now, started clapping, slowly, deliberately. Well, that's the most honest thing anyone said in this room in months. Commissioner Harris, the silver-haired woman looked scandalized. Oh, calm down, Janet. The girl's right. He looked at Lena. What do you need from us to make this work? Lena pulled out the list she'd been compiling. Real oversight. Not just approval stamps, actual monitoring of whether affordable housing commitments are being met. Community input sessions that aren't just performative. Legal protections for existing residents written into the approval so they can't be changed later when people lose interest. Those are significant requirements. Then you should have significant commitment to seeing them through. Commissioner Harris smiled. I like her. Ethan, where'd you find this one? She found me, Ethan said quietly. Or maybe we found each other. The meeting ended with conditional approval, conditional on meeting every requirement Lena had outlined. As they left the building, Ethan looked somewhere between impressed and exasperated. You just told a city commissioner you don't care what she appreciates. Was I supposed to lie? Most people would have been more diplomatic. I'm not most people. You hired me to be honest, remember? I hired you to be a community liaison, not to declare war on the Planning Commission. Same thing in this city. Lena stopped walking. Did I screw up? No, you were perfect. Terrifying, but perfect. He paused. Harris is one of the few commissioners who actually gives a damn about communities like yours. You made an ally there. And an enemy in Janet. Janet was never going to be an ally. She owns property in 3 gentrified neighborhoods and profits from displacement, but Harris can outmaneuver her if he wants to. They stood on the steps of City Hall, the afternoon sun making Lena squint. She was exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep and terrible coffee and the adrenaline of confrontation. I need to pick up Maya, she said. I'll drive you. You don't have to. Well, I know. I'm offering anyway. This time, when they pulled up to her building, Ethan didn't just drop her off. He parked, turned off the engine. Can I meet her? Maya? The question startled Lena. Why? Because you talk about her constantly. Because she's part of why you're doing this. He paused. Because I'd like to. But if you're not comfortable, I understand. Lena thought about boundaries, about the line between professional and personal, about how that line had been blurring since the moment she'd taken money from his nightstand drawer. Okay, she said finally, but she's probably a mess. It's been a long day for her, too. Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment smelled like garlic and cilantro. She was always cooking something. Maya was in her playpen, surrounded by toys she was systematically throwing onto the floor one by one. Someone's in a mood, Mrs. Rodriguez observed. Then she saw Ethan and her eyebrows climb toward her hairline. Well, Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Ethan Hayes. Ethan, Mrs. Rodriguez, she watches Maya while I work. The infamous billionaire. Mrs. Rodriguez didn't offer her hand. You planning to tear down my building too? Actually, I'm hoping to preserve it. Ethan's tone was respectful, careful. The structural assessment suggests it's sound, just needs updates. Suggests. Assessment. A lot of fancy words for maybe. You're right. Let me be clear. I won't tear down your building. That's a promise. Promises from developers are worth about as much as the paper they're not written on. Then I'll put it in writing, have my lawyers draw up a commitment, file it with the city, make it legally binding. Mrs. Rodriguez studied him with the same assessing look she'd given Lena the day they'd met. You always this accommodating? Only when I'm trying to prove I'm not the villain everyone assumes I am. Despite herself, Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. Well, at least you're honest about it. Maya chose that moment to notice Lena and let out a shriek of recognition. Lena scooped her up and Maya immediately grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking hard enough to make her eyes water. Gentle, baby, gentle. Ethan watched them with an expression Lena couldn't quite read. She's beautiful. She's a terror. But thank you. Mira was like that at this age, still is, honestly. Yesterday she decided she was a dinosaur and only responded to roars. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the stress, the impossibility of the situation she'd gotten herself into, Lena laughed. What kind of dinosaur? She couldn't decide. Changed species every 10 minutes. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Made him look younger, more human. Being a parent is weird. That's the understatement of the century. They stayed for another 20 minutes, Ethan sitting awkwardly on Mrs. Rodriguez's ancient couch, while Maya studied him with intense baby focus. Eventually, she decided he was acceptable and offered him her drool-covered teething ring. I think that's approval, Lena said. I'm honored. Ethan accepted the ring gravely, then handed it back. Walking him out, Lena felt the weight of the neighborhood's attention. People were watching from windows, from stoops, clocking the billionaire in their building. They're going to have so many questions, she said. Let them ask. Transparency is important. He paused at the building's entrance. Thank you for letting me meet her, for today at City Hall, for all of it. You're paying me, remember? Some things aren't about money. After he left, Lena stood in the hallway holding Maya, trying to figure out what had just happened. She'd let Ethan Hayes into her life in a way that felt dangerous, felt like crossing a line she'd sworn not to cross. But Maya was babbling happily, and Mrs. Rodriguez was humming in her apartment, And outside, the neighborhood continued its evening rhythm. People coming home from work, kids playing before dinner, life happening in all its messy, complicated glory. Maybe some lines were meant to be crossed, or maybe she was just tired of trying to hold everything at arm's length. The next morning, Lena arrived at the office to find Patricia waiting with structural reports on every building in the target area. Tom looked like he hadn't slept, his tie crooked and coffee-stained. The third suit, whose name turned out to be Jennifer, and whose title was Chief Financial Officer, looked ready to commit murder. "This is insane," Jennifer announced before anyone sat down. "Do you have any idea what these preservation plans will cost?" "Actually, yes." Patricia pulled up a spreadsheet. "I ran the numbers last night. It's expensive but manageable if we adjust the timeline and shift resources." Shifting resources means delaying phase 2, which means delaying revenue, which means our investors are going to lose their minds. Ethan, who'd been reading through the reports, looked up. "Then we manage the investors. Patricia, this work is solid." "Lena, thoughts?" Lena had been studying the same report since 5 that morning. "Mrs. Chen's building can definitely be saved. So can the Rodriguez building, and about 60% of the structures in Phase 1. The ones that can't be saved, we need to make sure displaced residents get first priority on new units." "At what rental rate?" Jennifer demanded. "Affordable rate. Below market. The whole point of this is keeping people in their neighborhood. The whole point of this is turning a profit while also helping the community. We can't do one without the other." "Then figure out how to do both. That's literally your job." Jennifer's face flushed. "I don't appreciate—" "Nobody cares what you appreciate," Lena shot back, borrowing her own line from the city commission. "These are people's lives. Figure out the money or figure out a different career." The tension in the room could have powered a small city. Ethan stood up. Everyone out except Lena. Tom and Patricia left immediately. Jennifer took her time, gathering her things with precise, angry movements. When they were alone, Ethan walked to the window. "You can't talk to my CFO like that." I know what she was being, but she's also right that we need the financial side to work. This project collapses if we can't pay for it. "So you're saying I should back down?" "I'm saying you should choose your battles. Jennifer's not the enemy. She's just doing her job, same as you're doing yours." Lena felt the fight drain out of her. "I don't know how to do this. How to fight for what matters without fighting everyone." "You learn. Same way you learned everything else, by screwing up until you figure it out." He turned to face her. "But for what it's worth, you're doing better than you think. Patricia's already implementing changes. Tom's terrified of you, which means he won't try to cut corners. Even Jennifer respects you, even if she'd never admit it." "She respects me?" "You think she'd let just anyone talk to her like that without retaliation? She values competence over politeness. You proved you're competent." "By insulting her?" "By refusing to pretend money matters more than people. That takes conviction she can respect even when it makes her job harder." Lena sank into one of the conference room chairs. "This is exhausting." "It is, but it's also working." Ethan sat across from her. "The Planning Commission approved the project with your conditions. Patricia's redesigning the entire Phase 1 to preserve historical buildings. You got my CFO to actually consider community impact in her financial models. Lena, you're changing things. Or I'm just making everyone's life more difficult. Sometimes those are the same thing." That evening, Lena attended a community meeting she'd organized at the center. 24 residents showed up, suspicious and scared and angry. She stood in front of them with poster boards Patricia had helped prepare, trying to explain what was happening. "So he's promising affordable housing," her mother said, arms crossed. "But what does affordable mean?" "Below market rate. Specifically, rent calculated at 30% of median income for the area." "And we're supposed to believe that." "It's in the city approval. Legally binding." A man from down the block, Carlos, who ran the corner bodega, stood up. "What about businesses? I've been in that store for 23 years. Where do I go during construction?" "There's a relocation assistance fund, and you'd get priority on commercial space in the new development at a reduced rate." "How reduced?" "We're still negotiating specifics, but the commitment is there." "Commitments change. Money talks. Everything else walks." Lena couldn't argue with that. "You're right. Which is why we need people showing up to every planning meeting, every progress review, every community session. The city only approved this with oversight requirements, but oversight only works if people participate. You're asking us to trust the process, an older woman said, the same process that's been screwing us for 30 years. No, I'm asking you to fight using the process. There's a difference. Lena pulled out copies of the approval documents. These requirements, they're weapons if we use them. They give us legal standing to demand compliance, but only if we actually do the demanding. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Some people left angrier than they'd arrived. Others seemed cautiously, reluctantly hopeful. Most were somewhere in between, waiting to see if this was real or just another version of the same broken promises they'd heard before. After everyone left, Lena's mother helped her fold up the chairs. "You believe in this?" her mother asked quietly. "I don't know. Maybe. Sometimes." Lena stacked another chair. "I believe Ethan believes in it. Whether that's enough?" Antonio used to say belief was like a muscle. The more you used it, the stronger it got. But you had to actually use it, not just talk about it. "And if you're wrong? If you believe and it doesn't work?" Her mother smiled sadly. "Then at least you tried. Trying and failing is better than never trying at all. Is it though? Ask me again when this is all over." Lena's phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Jennifer apologized. In her way. Which means she complained about you for 10 minutes and then admitted you might have a point. Lena smiled despite herself and texted back. "Progress?" "Progress. See you tomorrow. Patricia wants to show you the revised renderings." Lena looked around the community center. The cracked walls, the water stains, the lingering smell of coffee and hope, and decades of people trying to make things better. Antonio's chair still sat in the corner, empty but present. "We're trying," she said to the empty room, to Antonio's memory, to herself. The chair, predictably, didn't answer. But somehow, standing there in the quiet, Lena felt like maybe trying was enough. For now, anyway. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new fights, new impossible situations to navigate. But tonight, she'd gotten people to listen, had gotten them to consider that maybe, possibly, things could be different. That was something. It had to be. She turned off the lights and locked the door, heading home to Maya and another night of too little sleep and too much worry. But also to possibility. To the strange, fragile hope that sometimes the right people came together at the right time and actually managed to create something worth keeping. Whether Ethan Hayes was one of those right people remained to be seen, but Lena was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, he might be. The revised renderings arrived on a Wednesday morning that started with Maya projectile vomiting all over Lena's only clean work shirt. By the time she'd changed clothes, cleaned up the mess, and confirmed with Mrs. Rodriguez that, yes, Maya probably had that stomach bug going around, she was 40 minutes late to the presentation. Patricia was mid-sentence when Lena slipped into the conference room, and the architect's eyes tracked her entrance with obvious disapproval. "Sorry," Lena mouthed, sliding into the empty chair beside Ethan. He glanced at her shirt, technically clean, but definitely wrinkled from being pulled from the bottom of her laundry basket, and raised an eyebrow. "Maya's sick," she whispered. His expression shifted immediately. "How sick?" "Stomach bug. She'll be fine. You should be home with her." "Mrs. Rodriguez has it handled. I'm here. I'm fine. Keep going." She gestured to Patricia, who was watching this exchange with barely concealed irritation. The renderings were spread across the table, and even Lena, who knew nothing about architecture beyond that building's falling apart, could see the difference. The new designs incorporated elements of the old neighborhood, brick facades that echoed the original buildings, windows that matched historical proportions, green space that felt organic rather than imposed. Phase 1 now preserves 18 structures, Patricia explained, pulling up a detailed site map. "We renovate. We don't demolish. The buildings that can't be saved get replaced with designs that respect the neighborhood's architectural heritage. No glass towers, no generic modern boxes." Tom looked like he'd aged 10 years. "The timeline for this is 22 months instead of 18, Patricia cut in. "But it's doable if we sequence the work properly. Start with the most structurally sound buildings. Use them as anchors while we work on the others." Jennifer was scrolling through financial projections on her tablet, her expression unreadable. The cost overrun is significant, but manageable, Ethan said, especially if we adjust our profit margin expectations. Our investors aren't going to love that. Our investors will accept it, or we'll find new investors. His tone left no room for argument. This is the plan we're moving forward with. After the others filed out, Patricia lingered. Can I talk to you both? Lena was already mentally calculating how quickly she could get home to check on Maya, but Patricia's expression suggested this was important. I went to see my grandmother yesterday, Patricia said, closing the door. First time in 5 years. She didn't recognize me at first, thought I was her sister, who died in 1987. She sat down heavily. The building's worse than the reports indicated. Not structurally. Structurally it's sound, but everything else. The plumbing barely works. The electrical is a fire hazard. She's been living like that for years and never said anything because she was afraid if she complained, the landlord would find a reason to evict her. Lena knew that story. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that story. You kept your mouth shut about problems because complaining meant risking everything. She needs to move out during renovation, Patricia continued, probably for 6 months, maybe longer, but she won't. She says she'd rather die in that apartment than leave it, even temporarily. She means that literally, Lena said quietly. Mrs. Chen doesn't make dramatic statements. If she says she won't leave, she won't. So what do we do? Ethan had been quiet, listening. We make it possible for her to stay. What would that require? Patricia pulled out her tablet, started sketching. We'd have to renovate around her, section by section, keep her apartment functional while we work on everything else. It's complicated, it's expensive, and contractors are going to hate it. But possible? Technically, yes. Practically, it'll add months and significant cost. Do it anyway. Ethan stood, paced to the window. Make it a model for how we handle other residents who don't want to leave during construction. Some people will take temporary housing, others won't. We need options for both. Jennifer, who'd been about to leave, stopped in the doorway. You're seriously going to let residents dictate construction timelines? I'm seriously going to not force an 87-year-old woman out of her home. Ethan's voice was quiet but steel-edged. We make it work or we don't do it at all. That's not how development works. Then maybe we're doing development wrong. After Jennifer stormed out, actually stormed, her heels clicking angry rhythm down the hallway, Patricia laughed. She's going to quit. No, she won't. She's too competitive to quit. Ethan turned to Lena. Go home. Check on Maya. We've got this. I should stay. Lena, go home. She went. Maya was sleeping when Lena got back, her small body curled against Mrs. Rodriguez on the couch. The older woman looked exhausted but waved off Lena's apologies. She's been sleeping for an hour. Fever broke. I think the worst is over. Lena scooped up her daughter carefully, felt the familiar weight of her, the slight warmth that suggested the fever hadn't completely broken yet. Maya stirred but didn't wake. Thank you, Lena whispered. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd figure it out. That's what we do. Mrs. Rodriguez stood, stretching. Your billionaire called. He's not my... Wait, called? Here? My landline. Wanted to make sure Maya was okay. Asked if you needed anything. She gave Lena a knowing look. That man is interested in more than your consulting skills, mija. He's my boss. Bosses don't usually check on employees' sick babies. He's just being decent. Keep telling yourself that. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Lena sat in her rocking chair with Maya, watching her daughter sleep. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. How is she? Better? Sleeping? Good. Take tomorrow off. You look exhausted. Lena bristled at that. I'm fine. You fell asleep during Tom's budget presentation last week. That was because Tom's presentations are boring, not because I'm tired. Take tomorrow off anyway. That's not a request. Lena typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, fine. The next morning, with Maya still recovering and no work to rush to, Lena did something she hadn't done in months. She slept until 7 a.m. When she finally woke up, Maya was babbling happily in her crib, the fever gone, her usual chaotic energy restored. You're a menace, Lena informed her. changing a diaper that suggested Maya's digestive system had fully recovered. Her phone showed 6 missed texts, all from her brother Miguel. "You need to see this. Seriously, check the news." "Lena, why aren't you answering? Call me now." Lena's stomach dropped. She pulled up the local news site and immediately saw the headline, "Billionaire Developer's Secret Connection to 3rd Avenue Neighborhood." The article was brutal. Some enterprising journalist had dug into Ethan's past, found records of his family's time in the neighborhood under a different name. Daniel Reeves, his father's name before he changed it for reasons the article heavily implied were shady. There were photos of Ethan as a teenager, grainy and dated, standing outside the community center with Antonio. But the spin was vicious. The article suggested Ethan had manipulated his connection to Antonio to gain community trust, implied that hiring Lena was a calculated move to neutralize opposition, quoted anonymous sources claiming the whole thing was a con, that Ethan Hayes was using his past to exploit the neighborhood rather than help it. Ethan Hayes, who built his fortune on aggressive development projects that displaced thousands of low-income residents, now claims to care about the community that shaped him, the article read. But sources close to the project suggest his real motivation is profit, not preservation. He's using Antonio Alvarez's legacy as cover, one insider stated. "The community liaison is window dressing. This is gentrification with a feel-good story attached." Lena read it twice, feeling sick. Then she called Miguel. "Did you see it?" he asked immediately. "I'm looking at it now." "People are losing their minds. Mom's been fielding calls all morning. Everyone wants to know if you knew about his past, if you're in on some kind of scam." "It's not a scam. He told me about Antonio weeks ago." "Yeah, well, the article makes it sound like he's been manipulating everyone. And honestly, Lena, some of it makes sense, the timing of everything, the way he specifically requested you. He requested me because I knew Antonio, because I understand the neighborhood. Or because having Antonio's daughter-in-law on his side makes great optics." Lena wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Because Miguel wasn't entirely wrong. The optics were good, suspiciously good. "I need to go," she said. "Lena, wait." She hung up and immediately called Ethan. It went straight to voicemail. 45 minutes later, her door buzzed. She checked the peephole and found Ethan standing there, looking worse than she'd ever seen him. Still in a suit, but rumpled, tie loose, expression somewhere between exhausted and furious. "Can I come in?" Lena hesitated, then opened the door. Maya was in her playpen, and the apartment was its usual disaster of baby toys and laundry and dishes Lena hadn't had time to wash. She'd stopped being embarrassed about it weeks ago. Ethan walked in, stood awkwardly in the middle of her tiny living room. "I'm assuming you saw the article." "Everyone saw the article. My phone hasn't stopped ringing." "I didn't plant it." "I know." And she did know somehow. The article was too vicious, too calculated to damage him. But it's still a problem. It's worse than a problem. The Planning Commission is calling for a review. 3 investors pulled out this morning. Jennifer's threatening to quit for real this time. He ran a hand through his hair. "And the neighborhood thinks I've been lying to them." "Have you?" He looked at her sharply. "What?" "The article says you've been using Antonio's legacy as cover, using me as window dressing. Is any of that true? You think I hired you as a PR move? I think billionaires don't do anything without calculating the benefits." "You're right, I don't." He moved closer, his intensity focused entirely on her. "The benefit of hiring you is that you keep me honest. You push back when I'm wrong. You make this project better than it would have been without you." That's not window dressing, that's essential. The article quoted sources, insiders who say this is all manipulation. The article quoted Jennifer, probably, or someone from the investor group who's pissed about the cost overruns. People who want this project to fail because the current version doesn't make them enough money. Lena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this wasn't all some elaborate con. But the doubt had wormed its way in, and she couldn't shake it. "Why didn't you tell people about your past from the beginning?" "Because it wasn't relevant." "It's completely relevant. You lived there. You knew Antonio. I was a different person then. A kid with a different name living a different life. That's not who I am now. But it's part of who you are.
And keeping it secret makes it look like you were hiding something. I wasn't hiding it. I told you. You told me in private, after weeks of working together. That's not exactly transparency. Ethan's jaw tightened. You're right. I should have been more open about it.
But I wasn't trying to manipulate anyone, Lena. I was trying to separate my past from my present, trying to let this project stand on its own merits. Maya started crying, not sick crying, just bored and wanting attention. Lena picked her up automatically, bouncing her in that practiced rhythm that was pure muscle memory by now. What do we do? She asked quietly. We tell the truth. All of it. I'll hold a community meeting, explain everything, answer questions. He paused. But I need to know you're still with me. Because if you're not, if you're having doubts, of course I'm having doubts. I've had doubts since day one. But you're still here. Because I want to believe this can work. Because the alternative is watching my neighborhood die slowly or get destroyed quickly, and at least this way there's a chance. She adjusted Maya on her hip. But Ethan, if this goes wrong, if you screw this up, it's not just your reputation on the line. It's mine, my family's. Everyone who trusted me to keep you honest. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you risked a lot less than the rest of us. That landed. She saw it in the way his expression shifted, the way he seemed to actually hear what she was saying. You're right, he said finally. I have a safety net. Money, connections, options. If this fails, I move on to the next project. But for you, for your family, this is everything. So don't screw it up. I won't. I promise. But Maya reached for Ethan then, her chubby hands opening and closing in that universal baby gesture of, hold me. Lena started to pull her back, but Ethan stepped forward. Can I? Lena hesitated, then handed Maya over. Her daughter settled against Ethan's chest with the ease of children who hadn't learned to distrust people yet. She likes you, Lena said. Kids and dogs. They're good judges of character. He smiled down at Maya. What do you think? Is your mom right to trust me? Maya grabbed his nose. I'm taking that as a yes. Despite everything, the article, the doubts, the weight of impossible decisions, Lena laughed. The community meeting happened 3 days later, and the center was packed. Standing room only, people spilling into the hallway, the tension so thick Lena felt like she was breathing it. Ethan stood at the front, no podium, no safety of distance, just him in a room full of people who felt betrayed. My name is Ethan Hayes, he started. But 32 years ago, my name was Ethan Reeves. My father worked at the factory on 5th Street. We lived in a walk-up on 3rd Avenue. And when my father lost his job and we lost our apartment, Antonio Alvarez gave us a place to stay. The room was dead silent. I was 16, angry at everything and everyone. Antonio saw that anger, and instead of writing me off, he put me to work. Made me help around this center, tutor younger kids, contribute to the community I was so busy resenting. Ethan's voice was steady but raw. He taught me that potential wasn't about where you came from or how much money your family had. It was about what you chose to do with whatever opportunities you got. So you got rich and forgot about us, someone called out. Yes, Ethan said simply. I did. I left. I built my career and I didn't come back. Not even for Antonio's funeral. That's on me. That's the failure I live with. The honesty seemed to catch people off guard. This project, it's not penance. It's not me trying to buy forgiveness for abandoning this place. He looked around the room, meeting eyes. It's me trying to do what Antonio would have done if he'd had the resources. Fix what's broken while preserving what matters. By tearing down our homes. Lena's mother stood up, her voice carrying. By renovating them. By making them safe and functional while keeping them yours. Ethan gestured to Patricia, who pulled up the architectural plans on a portable screen. We're preserving 18 buildings, renovating them in place. The buildings that can't be saved, we're replacing them with designs that honor what was there before. And getting rich in the process, Carlos said. Yes, I'm not going to lie about that. This project will make money. That's how development works. But it'll also create affordable housing, preserve businesses, rebuild infrastructure. Both things can be true. Why should we trust you? Mrs. Chen spoke up from the back, her voice thin but determined. Developers always promise things. Then they change their minds when money gets tight. You shouldn't trust me. Not blindly. Ethan looked directly at her. You should hold me accountable. That's why Lena's here. That's why we have legal commitments filed with the city. That's why I'm standing here answering questions instead of hiding behind lawyers and PR people. You hired Lena because she's Antonio's daughter-in-law, someone said. That's manipulation. I hired Lena because she knows this community and she doesn't take my bullshit. Ask her. She's called me out in meetings, pushed back on plans, demanded changes. You think that's what window dressing looks like? All eyes turned to Lena. She stood up slowly, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations. He's right, she said. I fought him on almost everything. Timeline, budget, preservation plans. And sometimes I win. Sometimes we compromise. Sometimes I lose. But I'm not his puppet. I'm here because I actually believe we can make this work. Even after that article? Miguel asked. Especially after that article, because it forced everything into the open. No more secrets, no more questions about motives. She looked at Ethan. He screws this up. I'll be the first one calling him out, publicly. That's a promise. Why should we trust you either? Someone called out. You're on his payroll. You're right, I am. He pays me well, and I need that money. But I also live here. Maya's growing up here. This is my home too. So yes, I have a financial incentive to make this work. But I also have every other kind of incentive. This goes wrong, I don't just lose a job, I lose everything. The meeting lasted 4 hours. People asked every question, voiced every fear, challenged every assumption. Ethan answered all of it. When he didn't know something, he said so. When people called him out on contradictions, he acknowledged them. By the end, Lena didn't think everyone was convinced, but they were listening. Actually, listening. After everyone left, Lena helped stack chairs while Ethan collected papers. Her mother lingered, watching them both. You love him, she said to Lena. Not a question. Lena nearly dropped the chair she was holding. What? No, he's my boss. Mm-hmm. Her mother smiled. Antonio used to look at me the same way that man looks at you. Mom, I'm just saying, be careful, mixing business with feelings. It gets complicated. After her mother left, Lena and Ethan stood alone in the quiet center. That went better than I expected, he said. You set a pretty low bar. Fair. He hesitated. Your mother's right, you know. Lena's heart stopped. About what? It's complicated. All of this. He moved closer, and Lena was acutely aware of how small the space between them had become. The project, the neighborhood, us working together, it's all tangled up in ways that probably aren't smart. Probably? Definitely. My lawyers would have a heart attack if they knew how much I've let you influence this project. Jennifer thinks I've lost my mind. And maybe I have. But I don't know how to do this without you anymore. Do what? The project? Any of it. His hand came up, hesitated, then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I told myself this was professional, that I hired you because you were qualified, because you brought value. And that's all true. But it's not the whole truth. Lena should step back, should establish boundaries, maintain professional distance, should remember that he was a billionaire and she cleaned hotel rooms, and the power differential made this dangerous. She didn't step back. What's the whole truth? That I look forward to meetings because you'll be there. That I ask your opinion on things that have nothing to do with the project because I value how you think. That when Maya smiled at me the other day, it felt like I'd won something that actually mattered. Ethan, I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. Because we're supposed to be honest with each other, right? That's the whole point? Lena's phone buzzed. Mrs. Rodriguez. Maya's awake and asking for you. The interruption broke the moment. Lena stepped back, creating distance that felt both necessary and painful. I should go. I know. This is complicated. I know that too. We can't. I don't know what we can't, but we probably can't. Okay. She left before she could change her mind. Left before she could do something stupid like kiss him or admit that she'd been thinking about him in ways that had nothing to do with development projects and everything to do with the way he looked at her daughter, the way he listened when she talked, the way he made her feel seen in ways she'd forgotten were possible. By the time she got home, Maya was cranky, and Mrs. Rodriguez looked exhausted, and Lena's real life came crashing back with all its demands and complications. But later that night, after Maya was asleep, Lena pulled out her phone and looked at the photos from the community meeting. There was one of Ethan mid-sentence, his expression open and earnest, and she could see what her mother had seen. Could see the way he looked at her in the background of the shot, like she was something more than just another employee. Another problem to solve. She should delete it, should maintain professional boundaries and keep her head down and focus on the job she was being paid to do. Instead, she saved it, put it in a folder she'd never admit existed, because her mother was right. This was complicated. And Lena had never been good at avoiding complications. She just crashed into them head first and hoped she survived. The question was whether Ethan Hayes was a complication worth surviving. Time, as always, would tell. The folder on Lena's phone grew over the following weeks, accumulating photos she told herself were for documentation purposes. Ethan reviewing blueprints with Patricia. Ethan listening to Mrs. Chen explain her concerns about plumbing through a translator app. Ethan holding a hammer awkwardly during a photo op at the groundbreaking ceremony, looking like he'd never done manual labor in his life because he probably hadn't. She didn't examine why she kept taking them. Didn't think too hard about the fact that she looked at them before bed most nights, when Maya was asleep and the apartment was quiet and loneliness crept in the way it always did. The 90-day mark came and went. Her health insurance kicked in, which meant she could finally take Maya to the pediatrician without calculating whether they could afford both the visit and groceries. She officially quit the housekeeping job, and Mariana threw her a small party in the break room with supermarket cake and well wishes that felt genuine. "You did good getting out," Mariana said, hugging her. "Most people get stuck in jobs like this. You actually made something better happen." Lena wanted to say she hadn't made anything happen yet, that the project was still just plans and promises. But Mariana looked proud, so she just hugged back and said thank you. Construction began on a cold Tuesday in October. The sound of jackhammers and heavy machinery became the neighborhood's new soundtrack, punctuated by shouting workers and beeping trucks. Some residents complained, others watched from windows, suspicious and hopeful in equal measure. Mrs. Chen refused to leave her apartment just as she'd promised. The construction crew worked around her, sectioning off her unit while they gutted everything else in the building. Lena visited her twice a week, bringing groceries and checking that the contractors weren't making her life hell. "They're loud," Mrs. Chen said in Mandarin, which Lena understood from years of living next door. "But respectful. They ask before they do things. That's new." Patricia had made sure of that, had personally briefed every contractor on Mrs. Chen's presence, made it clear that anyone who disrespected her would be fired immediately. The workers thought she was insane. Who renovates around a sitting tenant? But they complied. "Your granddaughter did this," Lena told Mrs. Chen. "She made sure you could stay." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Maybe I should call her." "Maybe you should." The project had a momentum now that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Decisions that had taken weeks of debate in the beginning were being made in days, sometimes hours. The team had found a rhythm. Patricia designing, Tom implementing, Jennifer complaining about costs while somehow making the numbers work, and Lena serving as the bridge between the corporation and the community. But the complications her mother had warned about were growing harder to ignore. It started small. Ethan's hand on her lower back when guiding her through a construction site, ostensibly for safety. Conversations that stretched long after meetings ended, about things that had nothing to do with work. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. And Lena, despite every logical reason not to, found herself leaning into it, laughing at jokes that weren't that funny, finding excuses to stop by his office, noticing things about him that had nothing to do with his role as developer, the way he always ordered decaf after 2 p.m. because caffeine gave him insomnia, how he had a daughter's drawing taped inside his briefcase, the fact that he'd memorized Maya's feeding schedule without being asked. "You're playing with fire," Miguel warned her one Sunday while they watched Maya attempt to destroy his apartment. "That man is your boss. He's a billionaire, and you're you. That math doesn't work." Nothing's happening. Yet. But it's going to. And when it does, someone's going to get burned. Probably you. "I'm not an idiot, Miguel."
No, you're just a woman who hasn't had anyone look at her like that in years. And he's a man with enough power to make your life very complicated. That's a dangerous combination. He wasn't wrong. Lena had been alone since Maya's father took off, before she was even born, ghosting her the moment pregnancy became real instead of theoretical.
She'd told herself she was fine with that she didn't need another person complicating her life. But then Ethan Hayes had walked into it anyway, and complicated didn't begin to cover what she felt. The moment everything shifted happened on a Thursday evening in late October. Lena was working late in the temporary office they'd set up near the construction site, reviewing community feedback forms, when Ethan knocked on her open door. "You're still here." She looked up. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves. It was unfairly attractive. "Could say the same about you. I was next door reviewing safety protocols. Saw your light on." He leaned against the doorframe. "You should go home. Maya needs you." "Maya's with my mom tonight, having a sleepover." The words came out before she could think about what they implied. That she was alone, that she had time, that there was space in her evening that didn't usually exist. Something changed in Ethan's expression. "When's the last time you had an actual meal? Not grabbed food between meetings, but sat down and ate something?" "I eat." "That's not what I asked," Lena tried to remember. Breakfast had been coffee and whatever Maya hadn't thrown on the floor. Lunch had been half a sandwich while fielding phone calls. "Tuesday, maybe?" "Come on." "Where?" "To get actual food. There's a place 3 blocks from here that's not terrible." Ethan, it's just dinner, Lena. Between colleagues. Nothing complicated." Except it was complicated, and they both knew it. But she was tired of being careful, tired of maintaining distance, tired of pretending she didn't feel whatever this was growing between them. "Okay," she said. The restaurant was small and warm, the kind of neighborhood place that had been there forever and would probably outlast them all. They sat in a booth in the back, and Lena couldn't remember the last time she'd been in a restaurant that wasn't McDonald's with Maya. "Order whatever you want," Ethan said, not looking at the menu. "It's on me. This isn't a date." "I know. It's colleagues having dinner, colleagues where one of them is absurdly wealthy and the other deserves to not think about money for 5 minutes." Lena ordered pasta that cost more than she usually spent on groceries for 3 days. Ethan got a steak he barely touched, too busy asking her questions. "Tell me something about you that has nothing to do with the project." "Like what?" "I don't know. What did you want to be when you were a kid, before life got complicated?" Lena twirled pasta on her fork, thinking. "A teacher, elementary school. I loved the idea of helping kids figure things out." "Why didn't you?" "Community college was supposed to be the first step, but then my dad died and Mom needed help with bills. Then I got pregnant and Maya needed everything." She shrugged. "Life happened. You'd be good at it, teaching." "How would you know?" "I've watched you explain construction delays to residents who wanted to kill the messenger. You made them understand not just what was happening, but why it mattered. That's teaching." The compliment settled somewhere in her chest, warm and unexpected. "What about you?" she asked. "What did teenage Ethan Reeves want to be?" "Rich." He said it without irony. "I watched my parents struggle, watched them lose everything, and decided that would never happen to me. So I studied business, networked obsessively, built companies, made being rich my entire personality. And now? Now I'm rich and realizing it doesn't actually fix anything. You just have different problems, more comfortable problems, but still problems." "What a tragedy for you." He laughed. "Fair. I'm not looking for sympathy, just acknowledgement that money solves some things and creates others." "Like what?" "Like never knowing if people want you or want what you can do for them. Like raising a daughter who's going to grow up so disconnected from reality that she won't understand why other kids can't just hire a nanny when their parents are busy. Like building relationships where power dynamics make everything complicated. The last part hung between them, obvious and unaddressed. "Is that what we're doing?" Lena asked quietly. "Building a relationship?" "I don't know. What does it look like to you?" "Complicated." "Yeah." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, not holding, just touching. But maybe complicated isn't always bad. Lena should pull away, should establish boundaries, maintain professionalism, should remember every reason this was a terrible idea. She didn't pull away.
My mother thinks I'm falling for you, she said. Are you? I don't know. Maybe? Probably. She looked up at him. Are you falling for me? I passed falling about 6 weeks ago. Now I'm just trying to figure out how to not screw this up. We work together. You're my boss. There are about 17 ways this could go wrong. I know. So what do we do? Ethan was quiet for a long moment.
We could pretend this conversation never happened, maintain professional distance, make sure the project stays clean and uncomplicated. We could. Or we could acknowledge that this is happening whether we want it to or not, and figure out how to navigate it like adults. How do we do that when you hold all the power? I don't, though. You think you don't have power, but Lena, you could destroy this project with one conversation. Tell the community I'm manipulating you, that the whole thing's a scam. They'd believe you over me every time. I wouldn't do that. I know. But you could. That's power. His thumb traced small circles on her hand. And you have power over me too. You've gotten me to care about things I'd have dismissed as inefficient 6 months ago. You've made me want to be better than I've been. That's terrifying. Why terrifying? Because I've spent my entire adult life in control. And with you, I'm not. With you, I'm just hoping I don't screw up something that matters. The waitress interrupted to clear plates, breaking the moment. When she left, Lena pulled her hand back, needing the distance to think clearly. I have Maya to think about, she said. Whatever this is, she comes first, always. I wouldn't expect anything else. And the project, we can't let this interfere with the work. Agreed. So what are we doing, Ethan? He smiled, small and genuine. Honestly, I have no idea, but I'd like to figure it out, if you're willing. Lena thought about Miguel's warning, about her mother's knowing looks, about every logical reason to walk away. Then she thought about the way Ethan had held Maya with the careful tenderness of someone who understood how precious and fragile children were, about how he'd listened to Mrs. Chen ramble for 40 minutes about proper window placement because it mattered to her, about how he'd changed an entire development plan because Lena had asked him to care about people over profit. Okay, she said, we figure it out. They walked back to the construction site slowly, the October air sharp enough to sting. When they reached Lena's car, the used sedan she'd managed to buy with her new salary, Ethan stopped. Can I take you to dinner again? Actual dinner where we admit it's a date this time? When? Saturday? I could pick you up at 7. We could go somewhere nice. I'd need a babysitter. I could bring Mira. Make it a family thing instead of just the two of us, if that's easier. The suggestion caught her off guard. You'd want our kids to meet? Eventually they're going to anyway. Might as well control the circumstances. Lena tried to imagine Maya and Mira together. A 3-year-old and an almost 1-year-old. It would be chaos, complete disaster. Okay, she said. Yeah? Yeah, but somewhere kid-friendly. Maya throws food when she's bored. Mira does interpretive dance. Trust me, food throwing is manageable. He kissed her then, just quickly, barely more than a brush of lips, testing whether this was real or something they'd both been imagining. It was real. Lena drove home in a daze, simultaneously elated and terrified. She'd just agreed to date her billionaire boss while navigating the most important project of her life. Miguel was going to lose his mind. Her mother was going to give her that look. But when she picked up Maya from her mother's apartment and saw the knowing smile on her mom's face, she didn't care. Good evening? Her mother asked in Spanish. Complicated evening, Lena answered in English. Those are usually the best kind. Saturday arrived with Maya in rare form, fussy, overtired, refusing to cooperate with getting dressed. Lena had changed her outfit 3 times, trying to find something that worked for a date with children present. Not too dressy, not too casual, nothing with stains from previous baby incidents. She'd settled on jeans and a sweater that made her feel almost put together when the knock came. Ethan stood there with Mira, who was wearing a tutu over her jeans and carried a stuffed dinosaur that had seen better days. This is T-Rex, Mira announced immediately. He eats bad guys, but he's nice to friends. Are you a friend? I hope so, Lena said, crouching down. I'm Lena. Oh, Daddy talks about you all the time. He says you're smart and don't take his bullsh. Mira. Ethan's voice was pained. We talked about that word.
You say it. Adults can say things kids can't. That's how the world works. That's not fair. Lots of things aren't fair. You'll learn that eventually. Mira seemed to accept this logic and turned her attention to Maya, who was watching from Lena's arms with wide-eyed fascination. She's tiny, Mira said.
Can she talk? Not with words yet, just sounds. What kind of sounds? As if on cue, Maya let out a screech that could shatter glass.
Mira looked delighted. I like her. Can she keep doing that? Please no, Lena and Ethan said simultaneously. Dinner was at a family-friendly Italian place with crayons and paper tablecloths and enough ambient noise that nobody cared when children got loud. Mira narrated everything in her stream-of-consciousness 3-year-old way, while Maya attempted to eat crayons and generally caused chaos. This is a disaster, Lena said, wiping marinara sauce off Maya's face for the 3rd time. This is perfect, Ethan countered, chasing Mira back to the table after she'd decided to visit every other family in the restaurant. It was messy and loud, and nothing like the romantic dinner Lena had vaguely imagined. But watching Ethan be patient with Mira, seeing him help Maya drink from her sippy cup, while Lena cut up pasta, she realized this was better than romance. This was real. After dinner, they walked to a nearby park. Mira ran ahead to the playground while Lena pushed Maya in the baby swing, Ethan standing beside her. Your daughter's a character, Lena said. She gets it from her mother. Sarah was... He paused. Intense. Brilliant and chaotic and impossible to predict. Cancer took her when Mira was 6 months old. I'm sorry. It's been 2.5 years. I've mostly made peace with it, but sometimes Mira does something that's pure Sarah, and it hits me all over again. He pushed Maya's swing gently. What about Maya's father? Gone before she was born, found out I was pregnant and disappeared. Haven't heard from him since. His loss. That's what everyone says, but some days it feels like my loss too, like I failed at picking someone decent. You didn't fail. He did. There's a difference. They watched their daughters play. Mira showing Maya leaves she'd collected, Maya trying to eat them, and Lena felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like possibility. This is going to be complicated, she said. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. We work together, we have kids, you're rich, and I'm not. People are going to have opinions. Let them. I've spent too much of my life caring what people think. He took her hand. I'm tired, Lena. Tired of being careful. Tired of pretending I don't care about things I care about. So yeah, this is complicated. But I'm willing to deal with complicated if you are. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? Mira chose that moment to trip and skin her knee. Ethan was there immediately, scooping her up, examining the damage with practiced efficiency. Lena watched him comfort his daughter with the same patience he'd shown Mrs. Chen, the same careful attention he gave to construction plans. This man had built an empire on ruthlessness and calculation. But with the people he cared about, he was tender. That was the thing nobody saw, the thing the articles about him never captured. Ethan Hayes wasn't just a billionaire developer. He was a father who let his daughter wear tutus to dinner. A man who'd spent 3 hours arguing with contractors to preserve an 87-year-old woman's apartment. Someone who looked at Lena like she was worth more than any deal he'd ever made. Okay, she said when he came back, Mira sporting a Band-Aid decorated with dinosaurs. We try this, we see what happens. Yeah? Yeah. But if you hurt Maya, I will destroy you. Professionally, personally, every way that counts. He smiled. Noted. Same goes for Mira, by the way. Deal. They shook hands, solemn and ridiculous, while their daughters watched with the incomprehension of children who didn't yet understand how complicated adult relationships could be. The following weeks developed their own rhythm. Ethan and Lena were careful at work, professional, boundaried, making sure nothing about their relationship affected the project. But outside of work, they built something different. Family dinners where Mira and Maya created chaos while the adults pretended to have conversations. Weekend afternoons at parks where Maya practiced standing while Mira narrated elaborate stories. Late-night phone calls after both kids were asleep, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't perfect. Mira had meltdowns over shoes. Maya got another stomach bug.
Ethan traveled for business, and Lena missed him more than she wanted to admit. The project hit snags, budget overruns, construction delays, residents who still didn't trust the process. But slowly, impossibly, things started working. Mrs. Chen called her granddaughter for the first time in 5 years. Patricia cried during the conversation, then threw herself into the renovation with renewed determination. Carlos's bodega got relocated to temporary space with assistance from the project fund. He didn't love it, but he didn't go under, which was the point. The first renovated building opened 3 months into construction. Residents who'd been temporarily housed elsewhere moved back to apartments that had new plumbing, new electrical, safe windows that actually opened. They cried seeing their homes transformed while remaining recognizably theirs. "We did this," Lena told Ethan, standing outside the building during the move-in day. "You did this. You pushed for preservation when I'd have torn it all down. We did it together." He kissed her then, in front of residents and contractors and anyone who wanted to see. Claimed her publicly in a way that made her both nervous and thrilled. "People are definitely going to talk now," she said against his mouth. "Good. Let them know you're mine." Possessive much? Only about things that matter. Miguel, predictably, freaked out when he found out they were officially dating. "You're sleeping with your boss. We're dating. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm standing, you're in a relationship with a man who controls your income, your job security, and the fate of your entire neighborhood. That's not romantic, Lena. That's a power imbalance waiting to explode." "He doesn't control me." "Doesn't he? What happens when you two fight and he decides you're not worth the trouble? You lose your job, the project loses its community advocate, and everyone suffers." "That's not going to happen." "You don't know that. You're taking a massive risk, and not just for yourself. For all of us." The argument haunted Lena for days. Because Miguel wasn't entirely wrong. She was risking everything on a relationship that defied every logical calculation. But she was also happier than she'd been in years. Ethan noticed her withdrawal, cornered her in her office one afternoon when she was pretending to review contracts. "Talk to me." "About what?" "About whatever's making you avoid eye contact and barely speak to me for 3 days." Lena set down the papers. "Miguel thinks I'm making a mistake, dating you. Says the power imbalance is dangerous." "He's not wrong." "I know, but I don't know how to fix it. I can't just stop caring about you." "Do you want to?" "No, but I want to not feel like I'm risking everything every time I kiss you." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, and turned it to show her. It was a legal document, a contract modification. "What is this?" "Your consulting contract. Amended. If we break up, for any reason, you keep your position and salary for a minimum of 2 years. Full severance package if you choose to leave. Legal protection against retaliation. I had my lawyers draw it up last week." "Why?" "Because Miguel's right about the power imbalance. Because I don't want you staying with me because you're afraid of losing your job. Because you deserve security that isn't dependent on my feelings." Lena read through the document, her throat tight. It was everything Miguel had worried about, addressed in legal language that made it binding. "You're serious?" "Completely. Sign it. Make it official. Then you'll know that whatever happens between us personally, your professional life is protected." This is a lot of money you're committing to. You're worth it. The project needs you regardless of whether we work out as a couple." Lena signed it. Then she kissed him, hard and grateful and overwhelmed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me for basic decency. You should have had that protection from the beginning." That night, she showed Miguel the amended contract. Watched him read it twice, his expression shifting from skepticism to surprise. "Okay," he said finally. "I still think you're crazy, but at least you're protected. Crazy instead of completely vulnerable crazy. That's the nicest thing you've said to me in weeks. Don't push it." Winter arrived early and hard, slowing construction but not stopping it. The neighborhood transformed gradually, building by building, until even the skeptics had to admit something was happening, something that looked like the promises might actually hold. Lena stood in the community center one December evening, watching Ethan explain the Phase 2 timeline to residents. Mira sat on her lap while Maya babbled at Ethan's feet, both girls oblivious to the significance of what was happening around them. This was her life now, complicated and messy and nothing like what she'd imagined. But real, solid, built on trust that had been earned through months of work and transparency and refusing to accept easy answers. Her mother squeezed her shoulder.
You did good, mija. We're not done yet. No, but you're getting there. Getting there, that was the truth of it.
They weren't finished, weren't perfect, hadn't solved every problem. But they were building something, together. And for Lena, that was enough. The crisis hit in February, 6 months into construction, on a Tuesday that started with freezing rain and got worse from there. Lena was in her office reviewing complaint forms when Tom burst through the door without knocking, his face pale. We have a problem. She looked up from the paperwork. What kind of problem? The kind where we might have to halt construction. The city inspector found code violations in the Phase 1 buildings. Major ones. Structural issues we missed during initial assessment. Lena's stomach dropped. How major? Major enough that he's threatening to shut us down until we fix them. And the fixes are expensive, really expensive. How expensive? Tom pulled out his tablet, showed her numbers that made her nauseous. 3 million. Maybe more depending on what else we find when we dig deeper. Does Ethan know? He's in a meeting with Jennifer and the investor group right now, but Lena, this is bad. We're already over budget. The investors are nervous if we have to halt construction and dump another 3 million into fixes. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They both knew what happened to development projects that lost investor confidence. They collapsed. And when they collapsed, communities got left with half-finished renovations and broken promises. Lena grabbed her phone and called Ethan. It went to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Where's the inspector now? Still on site, Building 3. He's documenting everything. I'm going over there. The construction site was chaos. Workers stood around looking nervous while the city inspector, a middle-aged man with a clipboard and an expression that suggested he'd seen this movie before, took photos of exposed beams and foundation cracks. You can't shut us down, Lena said without preamble. He looked up. And you are? Lena Alvarez, community liaison for this project. These are people's homes. You shut down construction, you leave them in limbo. I don't make the rules, Ms. Alvarez. I enforce them. And these buildings aren't safe. So we fix them. Isn't that the whole point of the renovation? The point is making sure buildings are up to code before people live in them. These structural issues should have been caught during the initial inspection. Someone cut corners. Lena felt cold that had nothing to do with the February weather. Who did the initial inspection? The inspector checked his notes. A company called Metro Building Services. They certified these structures as sound 6 months ago. Metro Building Services. Lena recognized the name from early project documents. They'd been the cheapest option, she remembered now. Tom had pushed for them to save money. They screwed up, she said. Clearly. And now you're looking at either expensive fixes or halted construction. Your choice. By the time Ethan arrived, tie loose, expression stormy, the inspector had documented violations in 3 buildings. Lena was sitting on a concrete barrier, trying to figure out how to explain this to the residents who'd been promised their renovated homes by spring. How bad? Ethan asked, sitting beside her. 3 million bad. Maybe worse. Jesus. He ran both hands through his hair. The investors are already threatening to pull out. This might be the thing that kills the project. What about your own money? Can you cover it? Not without selling other assets, which would take time we don't have. And even if I could, it sends a signal that the project's failing. Other investors would run. Lena watched workers pack up equipment, their movement slow and uncertain. So what do we do? I don't know. He looked at her, and she saw something she'd never seen before. Defeat. I'm out of moves, Lena. The numbers don't work, the timeline's shot. Even if we fix this, we're so far over budget that Phase 2 becomes impossible. And without Phase 2, the affordable housing commitments can't be met. The whole thing falls apart. There has to be something. If there is, I can't see it. They sat in silence, the rain turning to sleet. Lena thought about Mrs. Chen in her partially renovated apartment, about Carlos, whose bodega was in temporary space he couldn't afford long-term, about the dozen families who'd moved out expecting to return to something better, about Maya, who deserved to grow up in a neighborhood that survived, instead of one that died slowly or got erased entirely. "What if we go public?" she said suddenly. "What?" "With everything, the violations, the cost overruns, the investor problems. What if we tell the community exactly what's happening and ask for help?" "Lena, they can't help. This is a money problem. The community doesn't have money." "No, but they have voices. They have votes. They have the ability to pressure the city." She turned to face him. "The inspector said these buildings need fixes before people can live in them. But people are already living in them. Mrs. Chen is in Building 3 right now. So either the violations aren't as critical as he's claiming, or the city's been letting people live in unsafe buildings for years. Either way, that's a story. That's pressure." Ethan's expression shifted. "You want to weaponize this?" "I want to use every tool we have. We've been playing by their rules. Maybe it's time they play by ours." "That's risky. Could backfire spectacularly." "Everything's risky. At least this way we're fighting instead of giving up." He looked at her for a long moment, something like pride crossing his face. Antonio would have said the same thing. Then let's hope he was right. The community meeting happened that night, hastily organized, standing room only. Lena stood at the front with Ethan, the inspector's report projected on the screen behind them. "We're not going to sugarcoat this," Lena started. "The project's in trouble. The city found code violations that are going to cost millions to fix. We're over budget, behind schedule, and at risk of losing investor funding." The room erupted. Angry voices, scared questions, accusations of betrayal. "Let her finish," Lena's mother called out, and the room quieted slightly. "Here's the thing," Lena continued. "These violations, they existed before we started construction, before we bought these buildings. They've existed for years, decades maybe. And the city knew. They had to know. They've been inspecting these buildings, collecting taxes on them, letting you live in them while they fell apart around you." She pulled up another slide. "This is the inspection report from 2019. The city certified this building as habitable. This is the current report, showing the same foundation cracks that were definitely there 4 years ago. Either they missed it then, or they ignored it. Either way, that's on them." "So what are you asking us to do?" someone called out. "Make noise, demand accountability. The city's threatening to shut us down for violations that they let slide for years. Why? Because now there's money involved. Now someone's actually trying to fix things. But they're making it impossible by holding us to standards they never enforced before." Ethan stepped forward. "We're not asking you to trust us blindly. I know we've lost credibility, but we're asking you to fight with us, to demand that the city either help make these fixes affordable or explain why they let these buildings deteriorate in the first place." "Why should we?" Carlos asked. "You're a billionaire. You can afford to fix this." "Maybe. But if I drain my own resources fixing this, there's no phase 2, no affordable housing, no expanded community center. This becomes a one-off renovation that doesn't actually transform anything, and I didn't come back here for that. I came back to honor what Antonio built, to create something sustainable." Mrs. Chen stood up slowly, leaning on her cane. The room went quiet. "I live in Building 3, she said in heavily accented English. "The building the city says is too dangerous. I've lived there 40 years. The city never cared before. They cared when my heat stopped working? No. When my pipes leaked? No. When my windows wouldn't close? No. But now when someone tries to fix it, they care." She looked around the room. "That's not about safety. That's about money." "She's right," Patricia said, stepping forward. Lena hadn't even realized she was there. "I'm the architect on this project. I've reviewed every violation. Half of them are technical issues that don't affect livability. The other half existed for years. The inspector's not wrong that they need fixing. But the timeline he's demanding, the penalties he's threatening, that's political. Someone doesn't want this project to succeed." "Who?" Miguel asked. "I don't know. But I've worked on enough projects to recognize when someone's putting their thumb on the scale." The meeting lasted 3 more hours. People argued, questioned, demanded specifics. But slowly, a consensus emerged. They'd fight. Not for Ethan Hayes, the billionaire, but for themselves. For the neighborhood that had survived everything else and refused to die quietly. By the end of the night, they had a plan. Community members would flood city council meetings, would call their representatives, would go to the media with the story of how the city had neglected their neighborhood for decades and was now sabotaging the first real attempt at improvement. This could still fail, Ethan warned Lena as people filed out. Public pressure doesn't always work. No, but at least we tried. The media picked up the story within 48 hours. Local news ran segments on the violations, interviewing residents who'd been living with deteriorating infrastructure for years while the city did nothing. Social media exploded with photos of Mrs. Chen's building, contrasting the violations report with decades of ignored maintenance requests. The city council was blindsided by the backlash. Suddenly, politicians who'd never cared about Third Avenue were issuing statements about their commitment to affordable housing and infrastructure improvements. Commissioner Harris called Ethan directly. "You've created a mess," he said, but there was approval in his voice. "The mess already existed. We just made it visible." "Fair point. Here's what I can do. I'll push through an emergency infrastructure fund. Not enough to cover everything, but enough to help with the structural fixes. In exchange, you need to agree to expanded oversight and accelerated timelines on the affordable housing component." "How accelerated?" Phase 2 starts within 6 months of Phase 1 completion. No delays, no excuses. Ethan looked at Lena, who'd been listening on speaker. She nodded. "Deal," Ethan said. The infrastructure fund wasn't everything they needed, but it was enough. Combined with Ethan liquidating some assets and the investors nervously staying on board, the math started working again. Construction resumed 2 weeks later. The next 4 months were brutal. Accelerated timelines meant longer hours, more pressure, constant problem solving. Lena barely saw her apartment, living between the construction site and Ethan's penthouse where Mira and Maya had become inseparable. "They're like sisters," Ethan's nanny observed one evening, watching the girls play. Mira was teaching Maya to roar like a dinosaur. Maya was teaching Mira that everything tasted better when you threw it. "Terrifying sisters," Lena said, rescuing a lamp from Maya's grabby hands. "The best kind." Ethan found Lena that night after both girls were asleep, standing on his balcony watching the city lights. "You okay?" "Tired, overwhelmed, wondering if we're actually going to pull this off." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "We're going to pull it off. It's not going to be perfect or smooth, but we're going to finish." "How do you know?" "Because you won't let it fail. Because this community won't let it fail. Because we've come too far to quit now." Lena leaned back against him. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of this working, of everything changing, of losing what we have because we're too busy building something new. We're not going to lose this." His arms tightened. "I know it's hard. I know we're spread thin, but Lena, what we have, it's not fragile. It's the strongest thing I've built." "Stronger than $1 billion empire?" "Way stronger. The empire was just money and deals. This is real." They stood there for a while, the city sprawling below them, the girls sleeping inside, the future uncertain but possible. "Move in with me," Ethan said suddenly. Lena turned to look at him. "What?" "Move in, you and Maya. You're here half the time anyway. Mira asks where you are when you're not. Maya has her own drawer of clothes in the guest room. We're already a family and everything but logistics." "Ethan, I know it's fast. I know we've only been together 6 months. But I also know I want to wake up with you every morning. Want Maya and Mira to actually be the sisters they're already acting like. Want to build a life, not just a project." Lena's heart was racing. "That's a huge step." "I know. And if you're not ready, that's okay. But I needed you to know I'm ready. Whenever you are." She thought about her tiny apartment with its water-stained ceiling and creaky floors. Thought about the neighborhood that was being transformed. Thought about Maya having her own room. About not splitting time between 2 places. About the family they'd accidentally created. "Okay," she said. "Yeah?" "Yeah, but I'm keeping my apartment for another 6 months, just in case." He laughed. "Fair, I'd expect nothing less." They moved in 2 weeks later, which was chaos. Maya cried the first 3 nights in the new environment. Mira decided she didn't want to share space and staged several dramatic protests. The nanny looked overwhelmed, but gradually it settled. The girls adjusted. Lena's things mixed with Ethan's until it was hard to tell whose home this had been originally. They developed routines. Breakfast together before everyone scattered to their various obligations. Dinner as a family when schedules allowed. Weekend mornings when they'd all pile into the big bed and pretend the world didn't exist beyond those walls. It wasn't perfect. Ethan traveled too much. Lena worked too hard. They argued about parenting styles and money and whether Mira needed that many dinosaur toys. But it was real. And for both of them, real was better than perfect. Phase 1 completed in July, 8 months after construction began. 22 buildings renovated, preserved, brought up to code and then beyond. Families moved back into homes that were recognizably theirs but transformed. Safe windows, working heat, plumbing that didn't leak, electrical systems that didn't spark. The grand reopening was a neighborhood celebration. Food trucks, music, kids running wild, Mrs. Chen's building had a ribbon-cutting ceremony where she refused to let anyone else do the honors. "My building," she said firmly, wielding the oversized scissors. "I cut." Patricia stood beside her grandmother, crying openly. They'd reconciled during the renovation process, 5 years of distance evaporating as they worked together to preserve the apartment that meant everything to both of them. Carlos's bodega returned to its original corner, expanded and updated, but still fundamentally his. He'd framed the first dollar from reopening day, hung it beside photos of his family that went back 3 generations. "You actually did it," Miguel said to Lena, sounding almost surprised. "We did it. All of us." "Yeah, but you made it happen. You and your billionaire." He paused. "I was wrong about him. About you two. Just so you know. Are you apologizing?" "Don't push it." Ethan found her an hour later, sitting on the community center steps watching the celebration. Maya and Mira are attempting to eat their weight in cotton candy. The nanny's got them, but it's going to be a long night. Worth it. Definitely worth it. He sat beside her. "You should be out there, taking credit." "This isn't about credit, it's about the thing actually existing." "Still, you made this possible. The community trust, the political pressure, keeping me honest when I wanted to take shortcuts. None of this works without you." Lena leaned against his shoulder. "We make a good team." "Yeah, we do." He pulled out a small box from his pocket. Lena's heart stopped. "Ethan, before you panic, it's not what you think. Not yet, anyway." He opened the box to reveal a key. "This is for the new community center. Phase 2 breaks ground next month, and the center's the first thing we're building. I want you to run it." "What?" "Run it. Director, manager, whatever title you want. Build programs, hire staff, make it everything Antonio envisioned and more. You've been doing the work anyway. Make it official." "I don't have the qualifications. You have every qualification that matters. You understand this community. You know what people need. You care about making it work rather than just checking boxes." He pressed the key into her hand. "Say yes." Lena looked at the key. Thought about Antonio, about the legacy he'd built in a cramped room with folding chairs and terrible coffee, about what it could become with actual resources and support. "Yes," she said. "But I want Patricia on the design team. Already planned on it. And I want community input on programming, not just me deciding what people need. Wouldn't have it any other way. And I want Miguel on the advisory board. He'll keep me honest." "Your brother who hated me 6 months ago?" "He doesn't hate you anymore. He's upgraded to grudging acceptance." Ethan laughed. "I'll take it." They sat together as the sun set, watching their neighborhood celebrate. Maya and Mira appeared eventually, covered in blue sugar and completely wired. "Daddy, we're dinosaurs," Mira announced. "Terrifying," Ethan agreed, scooping her up. Lena grabbed Maya before she could eat dirt. "Time to go home?" "Home," Maya repeated. It was one of her first clear words, and it hit Lena square in the chest. Home. Not Ethan's penthouse or her old apartment, but something they'd built together. Something that felt permanent in ways nothing else in her life had. They walked back through the neighborhood, past renovated buildings and new construction, past Carlos's bodega and Mrs. Chen's building, past the empty lot where the new community center would stand. People called out greetings, stopped to thank Ethan or update Lena on something. This was her community. Different than it had been, better in some ways, still imperfect in others, but alive, surviving, thriving even. "You're thinking too loud," Ethan said, just taking it all in. A year ago, I was cleaning hotel rooms and watering down formula. Now I'm running a community center and living in a penthouse with a billionaire. It's surreal.
Is it a good surreal or a scary surreal? Both, mostly good. She shifted Maya to her other hip. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. Things will go wrong, but we'll handle them. That's what we do. Phase 2 broke ground in August. The new community center rose first, a building that honored the old while being completely new.
Patricia had designed it with input from 36 community members, incorporating their ideas and needs into something functional and beautiful. Lena hired staff, a mix of people from the neighborhood and experienced professionals who understood community work. They developed programs, after-school tutoring, job training, health services, a food pantry that didn't make people feel like charity cases. Miguel joined the advisory board and immediately started pushing for more mental health resources. Patricia's grandmother taught Mandarin classes. Carlos ran financial literacy workshops. The center opened in November, exactly 13 months after Lena had first cleaned Ethan's penthouse suite. Antonio's old chair sat in Lena's office, reupholstered but recognizable. She sat in it sometimes when making difficult decisions, imagining what he'd say. Usually, it was something like, stop overthinking and just do the work. Good advice. Maya turned 1 year old on a cold December day. They celebrated at the penthouse with both families, Lena's mother and Miguel, Patricia and Mrs. Chen, friends from the neighborhood, Ethan's business partners who'd become actual friends. Maya smashed cake into her face while Mira narrated the destruction. She's eating it wrong. You're supposed to use your hands and your face. Pretty sure that's exactly what she's doing, Lena said, laughing. Later, after everyone had left and the girls were finally, blessedly asleep, Lena and Ethan collapsed on the couch. Successful party? He asked. Exhausting party, but yes. He pulled out another small box. I have something for you. If this is another key to something I have to run, it's not. He opened it to reveal a ring. Simple, elegant, clearly expensive, but not ostentatious. I know we said we'd take things slow, but Lena, we've built a family, built a community, built a life together. I don't want to wait anymore. I want to make this official. Lena's hands were shaking. You want to marry me? I want to marry you. I want Maya to officially be my daughter if you'll let me adopt her. I want Mira to have the sister she's already decided is hers. I want us to stop being two separate people coordinating schedules and start being one unit facing everything together. That's a lot of wants. I'm an ambitious man. You knew that going in. He took her hand. What do you want? Lena thought about the scared woman who'd stood in his penthouse a year ago, desperate and exhausted and out of options. Thought about how far she'd come, how much had changed. Thought about how some complications were worth embracing. I want this, she said. All of it. You, the girls, the chaos, the impossible balancing act. I want to build something that lasts. Is that a yes? That's a yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, because of course it did. Ethan didn't do anything halfway. They got married 4 months later in the community center, surrounded by everyone who'd helped build it. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. Carlos provided the food. Patricia designed everything. Maya wore a tiny dress and promptly covered it in dirt. Mira was the flower girl and took her job so seriously she created a comprehensive flower scattering system that involved dinosaur toys. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. Lena's mother pulled her aside before the ceremony. Antonio would be proud, you know, of all of this, of you. I hope so. I know so. You took what he started and made it bigger, made it sustainable. That's legacy. The community center thrived. The neighborhood transformed. Phase 2 completed on schedule, creating the affordable housing units they'd promised. New businesses moved in alongside the old. The infrastructure worked. People stayed. It wasn't perfect. There were still problems, still families struggling, still work to be done. But it was better. Measurably, tangibly better. 2 years after that first morning in the penthouse, Lena stood at the community center's anniversary celebration. Maya was 3 now, running wild with Mira and a pack of neighborhood kids. Ethan stood beside her, holding their newest addition, a 6-month-old son they'd named Antonio. You good? He asked. I'm good. Tired, but good. You're always tired. I have 3 kids and run a community center. Tired is my default state. Fair point. He shifted baby Antonio to his other arm. Any regrets? Lena looked around the center, at the programs running, the people gathering, the community that had survived and adapted and grown, at her family, biological and chosen, and everything in between. Not even one. Not even the early parts? The uncertainty, the risk, the terror of not knowing if any of this would work? Especially not those parts. Those parts made this possible. She leaned against him. You taught me that sometimes you have to risk everything to build something worth keeping. I'm pretty sure you taught me that, actually. Then we taught each other. Maya ran over, breathless and demanding. Mama, Mira says dinosaurs are better than butterflies. Tell her she's wrong. Dinosaurs and butterflies are both great, Lena said diplomatically. That's not taking a side. Sometimes not taking a side is the smartest move. Maya considered this, then ran off to continue the debate without parental input. She's going to be a handful, Ethan observed. She already is. They both are. Antonio will probably be too. Probably. But at least we're in it together. Together. Psst. That was the thing, really. Lena had spent so long trying to handle everything alone, convinced that needing help was weakness. But she'd learned, slowly, messily, imperfectly, that together was stronger than alone. That complicated didn't mean impossible. That sometimes the best things in life came from taking risks that terrified you. The celebration continued around them. Music and laughter and the sound of a community that had survived. Lena watched it all, holding her son, standing beside her husband, knowing her daughters were safe and happy somewhere in the chaos. This was her life. Built from nothing, from desperation, from a chance encounter in a hotel suite and a billionaire who'd seen potential where everyone else saw just another struggling single mother. It wasn't the life she'd imagined. It was better, because it was real, because it was earned, because every complicated, messy, imperfect piece of it mattered. And that, Lena thought, was everything. The sun set over the neighborhood, painting the renovated buildings in gold light. Somewhere, Antonio's legacy lived on, not just in the center that bore his name, but in every person who'd learned that community meant showing up, speaking up, refusing to accept that things had to stay broken. Lena had learned that lesson, had taught it to others, would keep teaching it for as long as she had breath. Ready to go home? Ethan asked. In a minute. I want to remember this. Remember what? This moment, this feeling, everything that matters, all in one place. They stood together as the light faded, as the celebration wound down, as their children ran and played and wore themselves out. Stood together as partners, as equals, as 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something that lasted. The city sparkled in the distance, full of stories like theirs, and stories nothing like theirs. Full of possibility and struggle and the messy reality of people trying to survive and maybe, if they were lucky, thrive. Lena had survived, more than survived. She'd thrived. And tomorrow she'd wake up and do it all again. Face new problems, find new solutions, keep building the life she'd fought so hard to create. But tonight, she stood in the center of everything she'd helped build, surrounded by everyone she loved, and let herself feel something she'd almost forgotten was possible. Peace. Not the kind that meant everything was perfect. The kind that meant everything was exactly as it should be, complicated and beautiful and undeniably, completely real. And that was more than enough. It was everything.